On this episode of the DTVC podcast, we've got Mitch from the Video Vacuum back on, and we're looking at Missionary Man. It's part of our Dolph's birthday celebration week. So we just reviewed Small Apartments on the site, and then we're going to be looking at Missionary Man here tonight. Now, also, the end of this episode, Mitch and I talk about the new Wave Productions film, The Women Eaters. So he reviewed it on his site, and I couldn't believe that Wave had another movie coming out, so I was excited to discuss that with him. So keep an eye out for that towards the end of the episode. And then next week, Rich Pierce, screenwriter from wrote the film Sector 4 Extraction, probably the one that everybody listening here is probably most familiar with, especially when he went on the Comeuppance podcast and discussed the production process of that and all the things that happened there. But yeah, Rich Pierce is back on. I say back on because he was on back in 2014, a very early iteration of the podcast. We had him on to discuss, we were talking about puncture wounds when he was on then. So this time next week, he's going to be on talking about Capital Conspiracy, the Don the Dragon Wilson film. So really fun conversation there. Of course, he's big action fan, big low-budget action fan in particular, so it was a really fun conversation. Hoping to have him on again in the near future as well. His newest movie, the newest one that he wrote, Prep School Disappearance, is on Lifetime, so you can check that out. He's done a good slew of Lifetime films, also some Tubi originals. All look like a lot of fun. So, Prep School Disappearance, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet myself, but if you check it out, it should be on Lifetime, kind of like playing, here and there, so maybe set your DVRs for it. You can check that out as well. And then next week, we've got Ty on for his monthly hit, and we are going to be looking at two that we've kind of been meaning to do for a while, so we just kind of put them together. One of them is Desert Dawn. It's essentially our Philippi factory sort of, realized, right? Because we've got Cam Gigandet and Kellen Lutz in the same movie. So Desert Dawn is one of the movies we'll be talking about. The other one is Shepherd Code 2, The Road Back, or maybe it's just called Shepherd Code Road Back. I can't remember, but it's the sequel to the Shepherd Code. So Alain Delabie, we've got Don the Dragon Wilson. Also, Shayna West makes an appearance in that one, so that one's a lot of fun. So we'll be talking about that one as well. It's funny, we got a screener for that one. And then by the time we watched the movie, we realized it was on Tubi already. So, but it worked out. It worked out for us. So, so definitely check that one out in 2 weeks' time. And then we do have a recording scheduled to probably get us through the month of November. So I'll be letting you guys know about those once we get those in the can. Now, in terms of DTVC Extra, one of the things I realized is that we've got a new Predator movie coming out this weekend. If I can get that one watched and the cartoon that came out on Hulu watched, I could do a new DTVC Extra. It's kind of like a kind of a next episode in that series that I did on the Predator films. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. One of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is I'm not seeing that 9 o'clock in the morning or 9:30 in the morning matinee that I like to do. So me, I'm a fan of getting there early in the morning on a Saturday, get the movie banged out, and then go run my errands. And so it's looking like the earliest Predator showing might be like 11:30, which, if it's an hour and 45-minute movie, it's going to be after 1, especially then you throw in like a half hour of trailers or whatever else they do too. So, and the thing is here in Philly where I run my errands, especially some of the places like Trader Joe's, man, all the young people get in there and they just clog the place up. If I get in there like 9:30, 10-ish myself, maybe 10, 11 in the morning, I make out pretty well. But then, once the kids have been partying the night before, they wake up and they start kind of making it into Trader Joe's in their active wear and they're half asleep and they just kind of wander around like zombies on their phones and stuff, and it's really hard to do any shopping in that circumstance. So I don't like to do my shopping later on a Saturday if I can help it. Yeah, probably more about my life than you need to know, but all that to say is if I can get an earlier showing for Predator, I'll probably get it watched, and maybe we'll do a DTVC Extra talking about that one and the cartoon that came out as well. Then with the YouTube channel, not this week, but probably next week, we're going to do the opening sequence in Hard Justice. So I'm looking forward to doing that as well. And again, if you're looking for the most recent video, it is the bathhouse scene in Showdown in Little Tokyo. I had to gate it. I had to make it 18 plus. So if you don't have a YouTube account, if you don't sign into YouTube, you wouldn't be able to see it. Also, I think it depends on how you watch YouTube. Like, I think if you watch on your computer or on your phone, you can watch age-restricted things. But I think if you cast it to your TV, you can't. So I'm not sure. Either way, if you aren't able to watch it, let me know. I might be able to get you a copy of it as well. I mean, I've got it on my computer as well, so I can always send it over to you too. I was thinking I could put it on Facebook, but I don't think so. I think if it's restricted on YouTube, it would be restricted on Facebook as well. So we'll see. But none of many people are watching that one as they've watched the other ones for sure. I think just because not many, I don't think it shows up in people's algorithms and things like that either. So, but yes, if you're wondering why it's been so long since I put out a video and you haven't seen the bathhouse scene in Showdown in Tokyo, it's because it's not showing up in your algorithm. But if you go to the page, if you go to our website, or sorry, not our website, if you go to our YouTube channel and you're logged in, if you're logged in with an account and you're over 18, then you can go see it there. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And then in terms of the site, we just did small apartments for Dolph's birthday. That's one I've been meaning to do for a long time now. And I saw it on Tubi. I mean, we're running out of Dolph movies. He's got a new one coming out next week, so we'll probably get that one once it ends up on one of the streamers. I don't know if I'm going to pay for it, but we'll see what happens. It's also got Michael J. White in it, so it could be a good one, but we'll see. But we're running out. I mean, I've got essentially there's Sharknado 5. He's in that for 1 minute at the very end. So that's one we've probably got to review at some point. A movie called Fat Slags that he did. That it is on Cinemageddon. It's not in a lot of places. It's also got Jerry O'Connell. That's one we'll probably have to do at some point as well. I don't know from there. I mean, I guess we could do the other two Expendables movies. We did do the first two, so we could make an exception to do the second two, I guess. But yeah, I mean, he does have a lot of stuff that's like in post-production, so we'll see what happens there. I know he's doing that one movie that Kevin Spacey directed. I don't think I'll be covering that one. I think, I don't need to be doing Kevin Spacey directed movies, even if they've got Dolph in them. It's just a little bit too much there. So, but we'll see. I mean, it could be. I don't know if it's going to be another year before the next Dolph movie, but we'll see. We'll get one there at some point in the future. But yeah, so next week I think we're going to do Mafia Wars, the movie that with Tom Welling and another Cam Gigandet film that Ty did back. We did a Philippi Factory episode that was all Gigandet movies. So I think Mafia Wars will probably get that one in this weekend. But we'll see. We'll see if something else comes up in the meantime. You never know what's going to happen. Also, we have some indie screeners we got to get in the can as well. So I got to get back into doing those. I think I got 3 more left. If I can get them done before the end of the year, that'll be big because we've got some other releases coming out this year. So we'll see what happens. Also, people listening, if you've got indie screeners that you want to send over, because we do get them from time to time, just know that I'm a little bit backed up right now, but I'll hopefully get to them soon. And then in terms of other appearances that I've made on podcasts, I was on the Comeuppance podcast with those guys. We did a No Subject episode. That episode was just released recently. I think it was released this past weekend, so you can check that out. Also, the Lambcast last week, I was on that one. We talked about sort of our horror movie memories, so you can check that one out as well. I think that is everything. So, before we get into the actual episode, of course, I've got to tell you about my books, right? Nadia and Aiden. You can get that one on Kindle Limited, and paperback. The link is in the podcast description. We got a new mass market paperback edition of Bainbridge. So if you haven't bought that one yet, that's available now as well. You can check that out. The link to my author page is in the podcast description too. And then end of this month, we're targeting the 28th for my newest release, Mark in Sales. So keep an eye on my socials for that. I'll let you know when that one comes out. But we should have that one out soon as well. All right, well, why don't we get into it? So we'll have John from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures playing our theme song. And when we come back, Mitch from the Video Vacuum will be on, and we will be talking about Missionary Man. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined by a very special guest who we've had on. I was trying to think, I was trying to count how many times you've been on, Mitch. It's been, I think it's close to 20, perhaps. I'm not sure. It's definitely been quite a few, but welcome back, Mitch, from the Video Vacuum.
Well, thanks, man. I feel pretty honored. I don't know if that gets me an honorary place in the DTVC Hall of Fame or what, but
Right? Yeah.
I'm gunning for it. I'm gunning for uh, how many Dolph reviews do you have? It's probably 70, 80.
Yes, I've got a little over 70 Dolph reviews. Yeah. And so, yeah, you've definitely done the most Dolph movies, I think. I think this is our third Dolph movie that we've done. I can't
Yeah, it was Altitude, and then
Wanted Man, right? Oh no,
and
Pups
Wanted
Alone.
Man.
I forgot
Yep.
Pups Alone. That's another one we did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there we go.
right. Exactly. That's
How
it.
could we forget Pups Alone?
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know. I always same here. I always worry. Well, because I always remember Pups Alone because we think about you coming on in December for your Christmas one when we talk about elves and we do whatever Christmas movie because Pups Alone was one of those that we did. So I don't think Pups Alone didn't get the response. I think I told you this before that John from After Movie Diner, when he saw that we were doing Santa's Summer House with kind of like every other DTV action star in it, John saw that he was like, "Thank God I didn't do that one," or something like I can't remember exactly. It was some kind of line like that.
We've taken a couple bullets here and there for people.
Right, exactly. Now the thing was, this is the first time I've ever done this in terms of Dolph. Is timed out an episode that coincides with his birthday because this will technically be, I think. So I always post on Tuesdays, and I think this might be close to his birthday. It'll be November 4th will be the episode. And so it'll be the day after his birthday. So when this episode goes out, he will have just turned 68 years old.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those fascinating guys that's kind of the video vacuum. It has like kind of a motto like quantity over quality,
Right.
and he's one of those guys that definitely hits the quantity aspect, but he's got I would say more hits than misses, especially when you compare him to like a Seagal or someone like of that stature.
Yeah, 'cause, he does something a little different from Seagal, I think, where I was trying to think how to, like there's that period in the mid to late 2000s where Seagal and Van Damme come down to the direct to video world, and bigger companies like Sony were getting involved. Which actually I think Sony distributes someone we're going to talk about today, Missionary Man. So they were still distributing. Oh, this is only '07, so it's not like it was that far from the early 2000s, but Dolph kind of took an interesting track where he started directing his own movies and sort of having more of a say in how his movies were made. Whereas like some of the other guys I think Don the Dragon Wilson took a hiatus after '07. Gary Daniels was kind of doing lower budget things that Cynthia Rothrock as well. So Dolph kind of stays relevant in a unique way with the way he chose to do different movies at this time.
Yeah, I think too. What's interesting is like with Seagal and Van Damme, they were still kind of doing vehicles, kind of doing a smaller version of their theatrical movies where Dolph kind of went behind the camera and he did some writing as well. And I think he was almost like kind of learning on the job. And like he made some missteps. Like I would say like, Defender, the one where Jerry Springer's like the president. But you see, especially as he goes on, especially kind of even going on in into today's films, like you said, he has more of a say, and I think he's able to inject a little bit of his personality, from film to film.
Yeah, for sure, and I think because like it's interesting with Seagal and Van Damme because I always put the two of them together when they probably shouldn't. They just happen to have come up at the same time, But I mean, Van Damme's I think almost 10 years younger than Seagal. Van Damme's more obviously European. Seagal's American. They have kind of different styles when they came up, but I just the way their career arcs seem to ebb and flow seem to be very similar. But when the 2000s came and Seagal was doing direct to video stuff and Van Damme was doing direct to video stuff, Van Damme was like, "Oh, let me play like like two of myself and get beaten up by Michael Rooker in a movie, or like play like a guy in a prison. And then Seagal was like you said, he's just like, I want to do more of like the exit wound things, but I think I know even better how to do these things than other people. So if you put me in your movie, I'm gonna just pretty much derail the production with all of my own like things that I want to do. And yeah, it's like Dolph kind of said, okay, I'm not getting the parts that I necessarily want. So what can I do to make these parts that I'm getting better? Oh, well, maybe if I write more, if I direct more, I can shape the film a little bit better, which, I think is one of the things about the movie we'll talk about in a little bit, Missionary Man, is that it comes off in a slightly different way than I think some of his 90s stuff that he was doing in direct to video.
Yeah, and Missionary Man is definitely, now that we've got some kind of distance from it, because like I saw it when it kind of right around when it first came out, and I was kind of cold on it. Now it's kind of like I've warmed to it a little bit more. I still think it's kind of a little wonky in places, but it that one definitely sticks out more than some of the other kind of interchangeable movies that he made at that time. And I think because he did give it a little bit of personality, whether it's intentional or otherwise, but it definitely is one that kind of I think checks more boxes than it misses, especially when you kind of look at some of those like mid 2000s DTV actioners.
Yeah, because the thing that happens, right, is that in 2010 he gets the Expendables and kind of takes it and runs with it. That one opportunity that he had in that movie, he really makes the most of it, and suddenly he's getting a whole different level of parts, after that, and it's almost like he just had to weather the 2000s a little bit. And but I think when he gets into like the 2010s and he's doing more kind of, I don't know if directs are the right word, but he's sort of doing kind of going back into some of those things that didn't that aren't as great, some of those 2010s movies. But I think he still brings a little bit of that to him. I think the other thing that happens in the 2010s is that he needs the money more. I think he kind of took more parts where he's only got a small part in the movie, or what's like Female Fight Club or The Package or Ambush, things like that, where he's barely in them. But he kind of has that resurgence. I think when you were on, when we talked about Altitude, you referred to it as a Dolphissance, where he was sort of resurging in popular culture. And so it's kind of interesting to think about Missionary Man in that context, because it comes before all of that happens, after the Expendables.
Yeah, and you can see kind of, I don't know if I would call it a stepping stone necessarily in his career, but it's definitely one of his better efforts at that time. And I think it kind of you can see some of the things that he was like maybe trying out in Missionary Man, like playing a character that had a little bit more quirks than we're used to seeing. I mean, he's still playing this, kind of like indestructible, kind of cliche kind of character, but at the same time, like he's kind of leaning into his age a little, like using reading glasses and like reading the Bible and like having like these quirky kind of traits, other than just being, oh, he's this hulking unstoppable killer, like in some of the films. And I guess you could go back to even like Showdown Little Tokyo, where he did a little bit of that, but I'm thinking, strictly in like the DTV realm, it was just basically, a disavowed soldier with a chip on his shoulder, or so it was kind of a more of a cliched kind of archetype.
Yeah, and you mentioned about him leaning into his age, because a few years after this we get JCVD, where Van Damme kind of makes the joke about how I can't do this one take because I'm almost 50 years old, and I think it's also kind of funny for us talking about this now, because when this movie came out, we were in our late 20s, we weren't really thinking about about 50, but now we're like close. I mean, Dolph wasn't quite 50, I think, when he made this. If he was born in 57, I guess he would have been closing in on 50 as he was making this. And now we're kind of closer to Dolph's age. And now, we kind of, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly seeing my eyesight is getting bad up like nearsightedness. So it's like I have, or I don't know, I think it's far, whatever it is that means I have to hold something away from me to be able to read it. I'm suddenly dealing with that. And so when I watched this in 2007, or I guess it would have been 2008, something like that, whenever it came out, when I watched it back then, I was, a full 2020 vision, not really thinking about any of those things. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I get that, sitting at the diner putting on the reading glasses.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that, that heroic juxtaposition of kind of like, uh, this he's a badass biker, but he still needs his cheaters to read. So
Right?
it's and I think too, like um I think in later on, like Van Damme would kind of adopt a little bit of this, like playing these characters that kind of had these little quirks about them that to show that inside this action icon here, there's kind of like a character actor kind of waiting to get out, and he like so, still some of the dialogue plays it with a little bit more of a flair than I think something like like maybe even like one of the better movies, like say like Men of Honor. He was still playing that kind of like disgruntled soldier kind of character, whereas this was like there's a little bit more here that you could kind of see the wheels turning, like he's just trying to kind of elevate his game a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like that, like Men of War, and like uh what was it? Yeah, some of those other ones like Silent Trigger, Hidden Set. I was trying to think like if those ones they had kind of had similar to like you think of like Showdown in Little Tokyo, where or like The Punisher, where he's sort of this indestructible kind of force, but then he has to get captured at some point, and he's either like tortured or he has to overcome something. And it felt like a lot of those '90s ones. They felt like they need to replicate a piece of that like he couldn't there had to be like an all hope is lost moment in the movie, or a moment where he wasn't so tough. I mean like Red Scorpion I guess was like more like '88, but similar thing, right, where he gets captured, and was it Brian James that tortures him, or does Brian James just torture MM at Walsh? I can't remember.
Oh, it's been so long
I
now.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, it's interesting, because this movie we're going to talk about here, Missionary Man, he there really isn't an all hope is lost moment in this film. It's just essentially when Dolph shows up, all hell breaks loose for all the baddies in the movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those movies. It's kind of interesting for what it doesn't do, as opposed to what it does do, and it's like there's like a moment kind of late in the picture where the little girl's supposed to stay with her grandfather and be safe, and but no, she's like, I want to go and help Dolph, so she runs off, and just as people that have watched 100, 500 of these things like we have, we were like, oh, that means she's going to get kidnapped and there's going to be a hostage exchange, or Dolph's going to have to shoot the guy through the eyes. And no, she just shows up at the end. Like, oh, they totally took a trope like that and just like, we don't need that. Let's do something a little bit different.
Right, it's almost like a false trope, right? Like we
Yeah.
we think what we think is going to see coming, and then it's almost like it's kind of a funny thing. It's almost like she shows up too late to be a part of the trope, essentially, right? Her character. Yeah, it's a really interesting way they did that. That and like you said, like there's a few of those moments where you think like. Like for example, there's that moment where, and maybe I should do I'll do a quick synopsis, and maybe I'll talk about a couple of things before we break into the whole, get into the film. One of the things that actually maybe I should mention before we get into it is the look of the movie, because that's like the kind of the most important thing about it. When I reviewed the movie, I didn't know enough about how movies work. Plus, there wasn't a lot of the trivia that you get nowadays, so I was just like, oh, Dolph as a director did a horrible job making it. It was like he made the decision on purpose for it to have this washed out, awkward look that it has. But in the trivia on IMDb, I think on two separate occasions it mentions that the film was shot in HD, and then when they brought it down to I guess standard definition, the transfer didn't work for whatever reason, and we get this washed out look with it. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts were on that, Mitch.
Well, it's kind of interesting because if that's the case, which maybe fine, but now like it's been so long since that movie's been out that there's kind of like a renaissance for this movie. I think people like appreciate that look. And for me, for one, like it definitely makes it stand out from, all his other movies. But the way it looks, it could almost be a stylistic choice because there's some moments that are so washed out of color, it almost looks like an old time photo. And like the movie's essentially, and we haven't really talked about the plot, but it's essentially Pale Rider on a motorcycle. And so and there are a couple of camera angles, the use of slow motion. It's very spaghetti western kind of influenced. So you can make a case that, oh, he was trying to do it. Maybe he just went a little overboard or maybe oversaturated because a lot of it looks like it was shot like day for night for night for day.
Right.
And there's like this weird like disconnect about some of, but then there's like some Sin City type moments where it's almost everything's black and white, but then like there's like you can see red in like a girl's dress or
Yeah, and to your point too about sort of the way it looks, I think also for me doing it on this rewatch where I hadn't seen it since the last time I watched it. When I last would have watched it, I probably would have been seeing it on a tube TV. I'm trying to remember. I think I would have been watching it on a tube TV, and it wouldn't have like the quality of the picture. Like, the fact that the tube TV wouldn't have had as high a quality would have been affected by the fact that it had that washed out look. And I think, watching it now, I think the computer screen that I watched it on when I watched it on Tubi has higher resolution than that. It's kind of like when I listen to music from the '80s nowadays on better quality stuff, and I'm like hearing stuff in the song that I don't remember hearing before. Because I was listening on a cheap mono boombox at the time, and so I think that kind of helped it as well. But to your point about like that kind of the Pale Rider element to it, I agree with you there as well. Kind of knowing more about that kind of thing too, because I don't think at the time I don't think I knew that either. I'd seen other Clint Eastwood westerns, but I hadn't seen Pale Rider, so I didn't catch that connection either. So I wasn't as forgiving, I think, with the look of the movie as I am now.
yeah, it's one of those movies that like now, like I said, now that I've gotten some space from it and like doing a rewatch, like I have a better appreciation for it now. And I think it would definitely bump it up, a half star, maybe even more from my original review. And I think just knowing that, whether it was accidental or I mean, really, there are no accidents in movies. It's movie magic,
Right.
and whatever the movie gods had, deemed for this movie, happened. And I think, when you had suggested this movie, like, there's countless other movies from that era that we could talk about. But when you said Missionary Man, I was like, let's do that one because it's almost more fun to kind of dissect than it is to watch. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just there's a lot to kind of chew the fat about with this one, I feel.
No, I totally agree. When I was watching it, I kind of recognized the same thing, that the movie itself, it moves at a pretty good clip. I think the last 20 minutes or so felt a little bit kind of drawn out. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But I think to your point, there's so many different things happening in this to chat about that I think is definitely worth it. So I'll do a quick synopsis, and like you said, it's based off the Pale Rider, based off the Clint Eastwood movie Pale Rider. There's a town out in South, I think it's in the Southwest Texas area, but classic story of Native American community that lives there that's being harassed by some evil rich person in the town. That rich person in the town, he has the sheriff bought and paid for. He's got judges bought and paid for, and he's making people's lives hell. He kills somebody, and when the movie starts, it's sort of Dolph is coming to attend the funeral, and he's riding his motorcycle. He's reading his small worn Bible with his readers, as we talked about. He's doing shots of tequila. He shows up at the funeral. He says a few Bible verses, and then I forgot before that. He also beats up these guys are beating a guy with a baseball bat that owes them money, and Dolph intervenes on their behalf or on his behalf and takes these guys out. So already there's tension between him and the gangs. But as the movie goes on, we kind of learn more about the gangs want to create a casino in the town, and essentially with the casino kind of cut out the Native American community so they don't get any of the money. Dolph, of course, doesn't want that. He's helping them avoid that to happen. And then also the bad guy in town. At a certain point, he calls in John Enos, who's a biker guy, and we find out that he and Dolph have some history. And essentially, the movie shifts for the last, I'd say, like 20 minutes or so, where this local guy, this local rich guy, no longer is the bad guy, and John Enos takes over as the bad guy, as the with the biker gang. But yeah, Dolph kind of comes in, whether he's beating the crap out of people with a trash can or with a shotgun. He's just taking everybody down. So yeah, Mitch, what did you think of Missionary Man? Like you said, it's kind of, you had a different sense of it watching it again.
Yeah, I mean, for I think the biggest debit for the movie is that a lot of the action for the first hour is very samey.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where there'll be 4 or 5 henchmen kind of either harassing the young girl or breaking up like you said, beating up a young guy, and Dolph will like ride in on his motorcycle, like, "Can I help you boys?" Or and then like they try to kick his ass, and he just mops the floor with them. Nothing really they don't really up the ante, except like the scene you said where he takes the trash can lid and kind of does like a Captain America kind of move with him. But then when you get to like the finale, and he's kind of this omnipotent, everywhere kind of avenging angel presence, it really kind of kicks into gear. And I think I think that would be my only kind of, like I said, the only real debit I can really think about the film, from like an action standpoint.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if it wasn't Dolph, I think it would be even worse, because it's like Dolph is like carrying it with like these one-liners and his classic Dolph voice, and he looks the part and everything. But yeah, it's almost like too. I almost got a sense that other than that one drug, the guy who's addicted to drugs, who he plays a part later in the story when he witnesses the local rich guy kill Andrew Stevens and some other people in a botched drug deal, and eventually he kind of. But even when he gets killed, it's kind of his own fault that he gets killed, because he's wasted and he gets on John Enos's bike, which doesn't help him at all. But it seems like Dolph, when writing the script, because he co-wrote the script, it's almost like he didn't want anything bad to happen to the characters. So it's like when the young girl and her brother are getting harassed by the rich guy's gang, Dolph shows up in the nick of time and beats the crap out of them. And it seems like almost as he was reading it, like he didn't want anything bad. I guess the other person that something bad happens to, I think, is the hotel owner. I think she gets the bad end of it with John Enos. But for the most part, it seemed like he wanted to be the savior, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to his characters.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I don't know if this is a word, but it's almost Segalian in the way that it kind of appropriates the Native American culture. And it's not like to the level of a Steven Seagal movie where he's like, wearing the tribal colors and, and all that stuff, but where he's actually, more of a, you can't really even say a white savior either, because he just kind of kicks butt, and he's not, personally invested in the thing, but there is that like kind of like one Seagal moment where like the henchman kind of has like a change of heart, and he kind of just lets him go along on his way. So there were moments there that I definitely felt like were a Seagal vehicle, but it definitely had Dolph's personality all over it, though.
Yeah, I think to your point about the Seagal piece of it, right? Is that Seagal like nobody can beat Seagal in a movie, and like in his early 2000s DTV stuff, like, occasionally someone would get the drop on him, but towards the end of whatever, by the end of the decade, nobody's getting the drop on him anymore. Even he's just he's just done with all of that, and this movie kind of feels, like you said, it feels that kind of way. I mean, the other thing is we have the baddie in a can element. How I mean, it's an easy approach, right? When you've got a local Native American population, and then you've got these white evil landowner types who are harassing them and treating them poorly. You already know who you're going to root for. It's easy. You don't have to do any background on the baddies or anything like that. You don't have to show them doing anything beyond just walking in the room, and they're horrible, and you want to see Dolph beat the crap out of them. So it's like kind of almost like I mean, it's one of those things that PM used to do all the time, right? They would have their baddie in a can who would just show up and Don the Dragon Wilson or Gary Daniels would roundhouse kick them into off a building or something. So you have that element there, which I kind of appreciate that it's there, but yeah, and I guess the other thing with Seagal versus Dolph is that Dolph pulls it off better when he's the omnipotent hero.
Yeah, and there's also, it kind of almost gives it like a Billy Jack kind of flavor too, a little bit, because he always kind of gives them kind of like this, like, this kind of like gentle warning, like, I wouldn't do that. Like he'll have like that soft side, like says, oh, I really don't want to do this, and then of course he kicks all their asses.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, I think the way they get around the appropriativeness that like Seagal always does, and like kind of the white savior kind of element, is they make it very clear that Dolph, he's not there. He respects the Native American traditions, and he respects the people and everything, but he's not there to co-opt it. He's got his own thing. He's reading the Bible and doing all of that stuff. And in a way, they have that one scene where he reads the Bible to the kids, which seemed like a really boring thing. Like I can't imagine if I'm a kid, I want even if it's Dolph, somebody read the Bible like that. But the idea was it was almost like here's not all white men are bad. Here's Dolph, to show you that we can get along with the white men, and if they're respectful of us, we can be respectful of them back, and that is a little bit different from like you said, Seagal, like wearing like the fringe coats and the necklaces and all of that stuff and doing the whole thing.
Yeah, and it showed too that like it was kind of like a full circle kind of thing, like where I have my Bible, this is what I believe, and then but he's also kind of sitting in on their meetings, and they're like having dinner with them, and taking in some of their culture. So it was almost like a culture exchange moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I almost feel like Dolph was maybe cognizant of some of these things, and he wanted to mitigate them as best as he could, which I appreciate that. I think that was cool that he did that. But yeah, it's also it like you said, it kind of it still like verges on some of that territory sometimes, and so I think they did a better job with it here than if you watch the Seagal movie, you'd probably be like, oh man, you're doing this against Seagal.
Yeah, I mean, compare this to On Deadly Ground, and I mean, I'll take this anytime.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, what was it? So we talked about some of like kind of the false tropes, if if maybe it's the best way to where they're setting up a certain trope to happen, but they don't actually go for it. And the one that you mentioned, the one with the girl, right? Because the girl's like, I got to leave and go help him, and she gets there too late to help him. Another one was when the guy the rich guy in town shows up after Dolph beat the crap out of his men, and he's like, I'm going to press charges on him for shooting up, because he also, not only does he beat the crap out of them, he makes them pull their pants down and kind of run away with their pants around their ankles, and then he shoots up an SUV that belongs to them. And so the rich guy shows up and he's like, oh, I'm going to press charges, and James Chalk, who is the sheriff, we know James Chalk, you see him in a ton of Dolph movies, he plays the sheriff. He says essentially like, no, you don't have any evidence or whatever, I'm not arresting him. And that's something that usually would happen, right? He'd spend some time in the clink, and either like the woman who's part of the member of the Native American community who took a shine to Dolph, maybe she goes and bails him out or something like that, or he has to bust himself out to like save the day. But they didn't do any of that. He goes into the bar with the rich guy and shoots up his bar after.
Yeah, that was another one where you're like said, eagle-eyed viewers like us, we're waiting for this. Well, we've seen this before, and then they just kind of refuse to pay it off, and it's kind of more refreshing to do that than, just like yet another variation of the same cliche.
Yeah, it's funny because recently I had Jeanette Ward on. We talked about Outlaw Johnny Black, the Michael Jai White movie that he not quite a sequel to Black Dynamite, but I guess within the same realm. Where he was kind of doing a spoof on blaxploitation not spoof, but a homage to blaxploitation westerns. And he kind of hit all the same tropes, but kind of hit them exactly like we're talking about. Like he made them happen. Like, okay, his character does get thrown in jail and has to find his way out. The young woman goes to try to help and she gets kidnapped, and Barry Bostwick is holding her hostage. Like he kind of made sure. And I think to some extent, it is interesting how when they avoid them, when they don't use them, even if they're setting them up like they're going to use them, it does help a little bit, I think, in terms of the flow of the movie, because you almost feel like when you're watching a movie and you get these signposts, you're like, it's almost like when you're at a wedding, right? And you get the program or whatever of like what things are going to happen. You're like, okay, all right, so we got to get the bride to come down. Okay, we got to do the different things. It's like you're like, I just want to get this over with so I can go home because I don't want to be at this wedding anymore. And sometimes you get that feeling with these movies where you're hitting these signposts. And to skip them is almost kind of a fun thing. It's almost like, like, oh, this speaker didn't show up today. That's one less person you have to listen to at this convention or something.
Yeah, and it's like scenes like that, you can almost audibly hear the movie shifting gears.
Yeah.
With like into the second act, into the third act, or like the scene where we said like, he's definitely going to get thrown in jail here, and like we're waiting for that shot where he's in jail and we don't see him being put behind bars, right, but we just hear that sound effect, right, of the doors being shut. Like, it's like you see that every in literally every movie where the hero goes to jail, and we don't get it here, and it's fun. It's and another big one too is, like you said, when John Enos comes into the picture, he definitely has all the earmarkings of right-hand man villain for the last act, and it is kind of an interesting kind of thing, which it actually makes sense in a way too, because the villain is kind of like almost like a Brad Wesleyan Roadhouse. He's kind of owns the whole town kind of thing. But when it would come to a one-on-one fight with Dolph, there would be there's no chance he's going to walk it. So it makes sense to bring in, somebody in the 11th hour, this big burly biker dude who could actually lock horns with Dolph, and it would be, somewhat fair fight.
Yeah, I wonder if there's two things that happen here. One, if they read the script and they were like, well, how are we going to have a big end showdown if Dolph is beating the crap out of his men the entire time, right? Like what, and I actually think of a movie I watched recently, Ironheart, the Britton Lee movie with Richard Norton and Bolo Young, and how like Britton Lee is just beating the crap out of Richard Norton's henchmen the whole time. So when you get to the end of the movie and he's fighting them one last time, it's like, well, obviously he's going to beat the crap out of him this time too. He's been beating them up the whole time. And so yeah, I wonder if they thought about that and they're like, well, there's no way. If we're just going to have Dolph beat the crap out of these guys at another time, it's not really in the finale. So we've got to make something bigger. But then I wonder too if they realize, oh, we can get John Enos for this part. Why don't we create a part for him that we can bring in? We only got this many days to shoot with him, so we'll keep the original baddie, but we'll just bring him at the end and have him do his day of shooting or whatever it is, and make him the bigger baddie. You never know, like you said, talk about shifting gears. You never know what, like if suddenly somebody's available, they kind of shift gears and add something to it.
Yeah, and I think too, making the hit like his gang of villains be bikers kind of helps with the whole spaghetti western motif too, with them riding their bikes into town and kind of going through the alleyways and like on the bikes, and it kind of looks like the substitute horses for motorcycles, especially like the last kind of like the scene too where like Dolph comes out of a dumpster, and it's very much like the scene in Pale Rider where Clint's in the trough and the gun comes up out of the trough and shoots the guy. So it's like it definitely that's why it makes me think that whole mix up at the lab kind of thing really is a homage to that movie and just the Western genre in general.
No, I totally agree. But I think it's what's interesting about the mix up at the lab is that like you get some scenes, like there's the scene where they're doing the meeting with the tribal elders where they're trying to decide what to do about this casino thing, and the main elder decides, you know what, we're gonna go with the old plan of like the money's going to stay here within the tribe, and we're going to make sure we're going to do the right thing by us and not sell us out. And in that scene, there's moments where it's so washed out that it almost looks like it's on a home video or something like that, right? Like it just doesn't, it doesn't look great. But then there's certain moments in the movies where the colors actually kind of pop even more. Like I think The Funeral is one place where it actually worked in its favor. And to your point, when you get to the end of the movie with the bikers, and like you said, you've got Dolph kind of popping up from behind the dumpster and things like that. And the way that they set up the town as well, where it's not an old West town, but it's definitely a small town kind of feel to it. It worked more in its favor for that, for sure. And I wonder, I don't know how people. It'd be interesting to see like the HD version of it if it exists. And if it's out there somewhere, what it looks like when it's like that. If it's I wonder if we'd like it better or worse because of that.
Well, I mean, we just we're practically one of the main talking points for the film is the look, I think. And I think, had we were doing, this episode, without it, we'd be, kind of wrapping up a lot sooner. And I think that's one of the just kind of, like I said, it's just like one of the strange gifts from the movie gods. Like, was it true? Was it not? I don't know, but it definitely makes it, makes it stick out and makes it memorable. And when you some of these things are interchangeable, but when you're like Missionary Man, oh yeah, that's the one that looks like a spaghetti western on acid. Yeah, definitely.
Right, because if you go through Dolph's filmography around this time, sort of the late 2000s here, you get a lot of names that are similar. You get direct contact, direct action. I mean, some of them you definitely would, like Command Performance. Okay, that's the one where he plays the drummer in a band, and there's a Die Hard at a concert. So some of them are a little bit more memorable than others. But like you said, I think it gets worse in the 2010s where it's just sort of like, puncture wounds and ambushed and all of these movies, the package, they're all kind of just sort of mixed in together. You're right, this one stands out for that. I think another one that kind of stands out maybe is Diamond Dogs, maybe for the wrong reasons, right? Because that one, he wasn't supposed to direct it. He's got a shaved head. It's all kind of an interesting one. But this one, you're right, it has a unique feel to it that in that DTV world, it's like, like you said, with like Seagal, like I have trouble keeping those movies straight, in the 2000s for him. And at least to have something like this where you can sort of hang your hat on, like this is what's interesting about it. Definitely makes it stand out, especially now in the world of Tubi where you've got so many options. You see Dolph's Missionary Man. It's definitely something that's gonna maybe spark a memory and be like, oh yeah, I might check that one out again.
Yeah, it kind of, when you think back to like that time, and it seemed like I worked at a video store about that time, and Seagal, Dolph, Van Damme, Wesley Snipes, they'd have these movies kind of come out about every 3 or 4 months, and if it was really easy to get them backlogged. And I think when Netflix started streaming, like that's when I was able to kind of catch up with all these movies. And I remember that, like, almost kind of getting burnt out because they were so kind of, cut and paste. But like I said, like this one was like, more so now than, before. That one kind of sticks out. Like you said, Command Performance, Detention, like there's like these ones. I think Dolph is good with when he has like a formula to work with, and then he's able to kind of layer in these kind of like quirky kind of eccentricities for his characters. And when he, like you said, like when he's just doing kind of like one of the guest star of the week movies, when he's doing some of the 2010 stuff, that's when it kind of starts losing something. I think the more say he has in his productions, I think the more personality they tend to have.
No, I totally agree. I mean, thinking about some of those moments in this film, like he goes to the bed and breakfast, and he gets I guess it's a hotel. It's not a bed, but it's a hotel. But he's later on he's eating, he's having his meal, and he's looking through his Bible, and the woman who runs the place, we can tell she has a thing for him. She's sweet on him, and she asks him some questions, and she's like, I don't mean to pry, and he goes, well then don't, and it's like this perfect line, it's so great. And of course it makes her more intrigued, and she ends up having a drink with him later. And of course, some other guy, one of the rich guy's gang, also wants to hook up with her and is angry that Dolph is there, which I can't even imagine, like, whatever kind of a creep you are, that you would do something like that. I feel like if you see her sitting with Dolph, like that's the last person you want to like start a fight with is Dolph. And of course he stands up and he's like a good foot taller than the guy and starts throwing him through tables and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of a fun thing where, and it's funny, like, she shows up with like a nice bottle of tequila because she knows he likes tequila. And of course he has to drink the tequila with no salt, no lime, right? He just does it straight, which is classic as well.
Yeah, and like those kinds of moments, like there are scenes like that where he gets accosted at the bar because the guy's being unmannerly to the hotel owner, who, I mean, and let's face it, like the hotel owner, that's a trope right out of the westerns anyway.
Yes.
Like, she would have been a saloon owner or whatever, but I think there's those kind of just like stock moments that really make me think, like, this really could have been a good pilot episode for a series where Dolph goes, kind of from town to town, kind of like, kind of like the fugitive or whatever, or renegade because of the motorcycle. Yeah. It kind of had that feeling where this was almost like I don't know if it was intended as a series or like a franchise or whatever, but it definitely has those hallmarks of like a pilot of a one of those action packed TV shows from the 90s.
No, I totally agree. So, Renegade was what I thought of too, because when you mentioned especially the Western element, I mean, there was Renegade was kind of a have gun will travel kind of thing with the bounty hunter thing too. What was that the Steve McQueen show, right, where he was the bounty hunter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it had a kind of a feel like that. It was meant to have a kind of a feel like that, but also kind of a wagon train element as well, right? Because he would be traveling around, and Bobby Six Killer and Kathleen Kim on a Cheyenne would be kind of traveling with him, and they'd meet new people and get involved with them and stuff like that. So yeah, it kind of pulled, Stephen J. Cannell, he pulled from a lot of those kind of things when he would make a show like that. But Dolph in that similar role, I think would have been a really fun show to watch. I mean, the only show we ended up getting from him was that show Safe, right? The fire department show. But this would have been a good one of him traveling the Southwest on his motorcycle, and just all these different things pop up, almost like kind of like an A-Team kind of thing as well, where I guess that's another Stephen J. Cannell show, that he would just kind of get involved with these incidents for 45 minutes and beat the crap out of people, and then leave it better than that it was there when he got there.
And there's also like that interesting kind of moment between him and John Enos, where it's like John Enos knows him from before. He may have even killed him at some point, but and it's kind of left ambiguous whether he's really kind of back from the dead or if it's just kind of, oh, I got shot and I got better. You never really know, because they keep the exposition kind of to the minimum, which was another thing I appreciated. Like, a lot of times there would have been a big flashback to explain how these two are connected, and no, Dolph just shoots them. Right. So I feel like that kind of backstory, if it had gone or had a sequel or went to television or something, I feel that could have been explored a little bit.
Yeah, I meant to watch that scene again when he kills Enos, because he has that really great quote just before he blows his head off, and it's such a great applause scene. And again, it's another scene that I think looks better with the washed out effect, because essentially he shoots him and like half his head ends up on the car behind him, and I can't remember, there was a line that he says, because he's like, I thought you were dead or something like that, and he's like, I don't know, he says like, I'm not, or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but then he blows his head off, which it was an absolute beautiful scene.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I like a lot of movies, they would have been tempted to do like the High Plains Drifter scene where it goes back, and shows like him being whipped or whatever it was that happened before he gets his revenge, and no, he just shoots him. It's just like, it's kind of like one of those, like, and I think too, when you're watching moments like that in 2007, 2008, for for whatever reason, because you're just expecting these moments, but now that God, what's it been, 17 years later, moments like that are the moments we appreciate now, because it wasn't that cookie cutter scene. It wasn't that, uh, it didn't follow to those specific beats. That I think, that there are plenty of those moments that are just kind of deeks when you're not expecting it to, that makes it just kind of memorable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And the line, I forget the line. The line is Enos goes, "That's impossible. It can't be you." And Dolph goes, "It's me." And he blows his head off. And to your point, like there's nothing else going on there. Like you said, there could have been a flashback to Eno shooting him and him survive. Like maybe getting nursed to health by, because we get that one moment where he goes to see that guy who's got on a crutch, who gives him his shotgun, and gives him whatever, and we get the sense that maybe that's the guy who like nursed him to health or something like that, and he tells him like, oh, Enos is out and they're looking for you or whatever, and so he's like, okay, I gotta confront him as well. But yeah, they don't give you the flashback. They don't get in it, and I think it would have hurt that scene too, because that scene is kind of bang bang, right? He's like, that's impossible. It can't be you. It's me. Boom. It's like, and then of course his brains are splattered on the car behind him, which I think is like a white SUV to make it even more of an effect. And yeah, it's like I don't know if whether it was a budgetary thing where they're like, okay, we don't have the money to shoot these scenes with John Enos to do the flashbacks, and it just ended up working out in that way, or if it just, as they were reading the pacing and everything, they said, you know what, let's just have it like this. This is going to be perfect if it goes out that way, which it was. It had so much great effect.
Yeah, and it's like that whole last 20 minutes just has like almost like a different vibe than the what came before it. And I mean, it's not like one of those things where it kind of feels like it was reshot, or if it was, it just kind of it's like, like I said, in the first hour or so, a lot of the fights are kind of like the 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 henchmen surrounding Dolph and Dolph kicking their butts. Whereas this, it becomes almost like kind of like a game of hide and seek, and it's also kind of back from the dead, because he's it's one of those things where he's everywhere at once kind of thing. But it also, he just maybe a special forces guy that who knows his way around the small town. So I like that ambiguity about it too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there, and I think, I mean, like you get some the scenes where he's beating up the guys. I mean, again, it's like classic PM baddie in a can kind of deal, where it's like these guys are that bad, they're that horrible, and we want to see Dolph beat the crap out of them. There's that one scene where the guy with the kind of the Fu Manchu mustache is there, and Dolph's like, this knee is gonna break your nose, and there's nothing you could do about it. And the guy's like, oh, I like to see you try, and then the guy goes to like shoot him, and Dolph like grabs the gun and knees him breaks his nose, and then uses like the gun to like beat everybody else up. It just sort of takes them all down. But it's such a beautiful sequence there. And there's not a lot of setup that you need for. I mean, these guys are, they're creeps. They're being really rough on the young girl, which is just not good. And of course, there's Brad Eames, the MMA fighter, whose character sees that and is like, yeah, are we really doing this, guys? Are we really attacking young girls? Like I thought, it was one thing when we were beating up guys, but this is a little bit much. But it's like, it's kind of that perfect Western moment with the great payoff. And these guys, I mean, I don't know how I would feel. I guess if I could be in a Dolph movie, I'd take whatever part they give me, but I would kind of not want to be the jerk who gets the crap beat out of me and everybody applauds, seeing me, getting beaten up like that.
Yeah, like I said, that scene too. Like when do you usually see a scene where one of the henchmen's like, "Whoa, time out, guys! So wait, we're not like like we're bad. We're not that bad, are we?" And it was just kind of like one of those, again, like one of like. You said like there's these signposts. So it was like, well, I didn't expect that signpost. That was a nice little twist on a scene we've seen 100 times.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I mean, just the way they used that character, the 15-year-old girl, who was, I should have pulled her name on here. I'm looking up the quotes here, but I think her name was Destiny, the actor's name. Chelsea Ricketts. I don't know why I thought Destiny, but Chelsea Ricketts is her name. But she's, I think she was 18 at the time when she was playing a 15-year-old. I mean, there's certain elements I joked about when I reviewed the movie at the time that I didn't really seem to care so much about now, like the fact that she was wearing designer jeans in the middle of nowhere. Like I don't even know where she would be getting them from at that point. But that character there's a certain way that character's supposed to go. That we're supposed to get that character, and we don't really get her that way. There's that moment where, for whatever reason, they decide when they're all eating dinner that uh, she's the one who takes Dolph outside while the family has a conversation. It's a girl, and they kind of have this moment where they're talking to each other and everything, and it was kind of an odd. It was like again, it was like a kind of conversation that you wouldn't necessarily see in a movie like that, where there's she's just talking about like what she's been dealing with and all of these kinds of things, and he's sort of talking about himself a little bit, but not much. But that character usually has certain beats that they're supposed to follow, and whatever reason in Dolph's writing or whatever, he decided, I'm not going to follow those beats all the way up until the end, where she leaves like we think she's going to, but she gets there too late to be able to have any effect on the end of the movie.
Yeah, and then a lot of movies too, that dialogue would have been given to the mother character, I think, because it's just that's kind of just like one of those stock scenes, but again with a little twist. And going back to what you were saying, where it's almost kind of like a wagon train element, that was definitely like an element of wagon train, where the cowpoke is kind of sitting out, and like the pioneer daughter would come and they'd have this little conversation like, Paul's not doing too good, or you know what I mean. It is kind of like a trope that goes back, but with a little bit different flavor.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. When it's like, Wagon Train, my wife a lot of times will have Me TV on, and they have like the afternoon westerns, and I think Wagon Train is like the last one that they show. It's kind of I don't know if it's only on weekends or if it's weekdays as well, but yeah, there are these beats with Wagon Train. I think we've talked about this before because obviously Star Trek follows those beats. And I guess Shatner's the same as that main character on Wagon Train, who's always hooking up with different women in different towns. But you're right. There's always that conversation where they're on the set. There's the matte painting of the stars that they're looking out over, and she's describing her problems, and it's like, well, the wagon train's here in town for a little bit, so I guess I can help solve your problems there and get involved and fix everything. And it's almost like Dolph, even though Dolph had already decided he was going to do that. And I guess maybe that's part of the thing, right? Because Dolph had already decided he was going to do that. There wasn't a time for her to convince him that he needed to help. He already knew he was going to help. And so they made the conversation more about her being a 15-year-old living in this environment and deciding like whether she wanted to cut and run or kind of, stay and make something of herself there.
Yeah. And it's, it's well acted. It's well shot. It's like one of those moments. A lot of I when I'm watching something, I'm like, if I have to go to the bathroom or I hit pause or whatever. But if you were, say, to catch this on Spike TV back in the day, that might have been a scene where you get up and go get a beer or something. Like in typical movies, like it's like, okay, here comes a bunch of exposition. I already know all this stuff. I won't miss anything. But it's because they have a good rapport with each other. That's like definitely. With as dramatic scenes go, like that was one of the better parts of the film.
Yeah, and like you said, it wasn't expected. Like again, like you said, the mother would have been the one having that conversation, and it did kind of strike me odd that it was like, oh, she's taking him outside. And no, it's not instead of the mother. Now he does have his moment with the mother later, and I think maybe. And the closest thing we get to a standard trope kind of thing in these movies, there's the moment where Dolph hooks up with the mother when he was getting ready to go out and take down Enos's gang. And in that period overnight where he's with the mother, that's when Enos's gang, we don't know if they kill the woman who owns the hotel, if they just assault her. We don't know exactly what happens there, but essentially in his absence, these things happen. And so that's kind of thing that we see a lot, right? In these westerns where it's like, oh, he's going to spend his time hooking up with a woman while, or these action movies, he hooks up with a woman and that's where everything goes to hell, is that he's that 8 hours of time, whatever, when he decided to take a little time for himself.
Yeah. And I think, and even that it's done, a lot of movies of that ilk would be the gratuitous sex scene, the the just the standard, oh, we got to have at least two breasts in here or something somewhere, and we put them in it. Whereas this, it's just kind of like off screen, and it's just he, like you said, they just have a nice little moment, and then wake up, oh crap, somebody got killed, and now I got to go back.
Yeah, there's almost something like you were saying earlier about how Dolph was kind of leaning into his age. There's something very adult about their moment where they're like two mature people. It was like very different, I think, like, from, say, what was the movie? Kindergarten Cop 2, right? Where he's hooking up with someone who's like a good, like, 25 years younger than him, I
Yeah.
think. And it's like your classic moment where it's like all the tropes, all the things are being done there, in that sequence. And of course that movie leans on all of them so heavily, right? Like it's like, that character that's the young woman that's the teacher that they hook up and all those kinds of things. This is something that's like it's kind of interesting that it's 10 years before, because I think, or maybe it was like 5 or 6 years before. I think Kindergarten Cop was like mid 2010s, but that he's doing this like very mature scene here, and then he goes to Kindergarten Cop 2, which I'm not saying I hated that one. I got a kick out of that one, but that one like leans more heavily on all of those kinds of things and hits all of those signposts in a way that this movie doesn't.
Well, I think it has a little bit more wiggle room because it's a comedy first and like an action movie second, I
Mm.
think. Um, but whereas, yeah, this is like, it, a lot of times when movies are trying to like feed you masters and try to do the Western thing while still doing the DVTC thing, like I think sometimes it gets lost in translation or whatever. But I think this is one of those movies where um, like these little moments are kind of fun to pick at and just kind of see how they differ from just kind of like the assembly line stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. I totally agree. Now the other thing, of course, we get is, I mean, we get the moment where the grandfather is telling the young people about his experience growing up and, being adopted by white family members, or by white people in town, and being told he can't speak his language, being beaten if he tried to, and all that stuff. And it's interesting because a lot of these movies, they sort of play to more conservative audiences who don't like to think about sort of that history, those kinds of things that actually did happen. And Dolph's like, no, we're putting this in the movie as well. We're gonna. It's the kind of thing that I don't think you would see in a Seagal movie, to be honest. I don't think Seagal would be putting that kind of a thing in there. It's more about like, oh, I'm here to protect you from the current issue, and I'm here to sort of appropriate, whatever your traditions are and your customs are. But I don't want to hear about what you had to deal with in the past with people, either taking your land or abusing you or any of those kinds of things. I don't want to know about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's one of those nice little moments too that maybe you weren't expecting from just like a your typical Dolph movie, and it also I think in a way, um, the I think by like you said, like having the Native American talk about it instead of the star, and having him listen instead of speak. I think that uh we might see something like that nowadays, where I think some of the filmmaking's a little bit more enlightened, but like to see it back then was definitely kind of I think ahead of its time.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Because I think there's a lot of a desire to do like a Seven Samurai kind of thing, where the white guy comes in and sort of takes over and tells everybody what to do and how to handle things and all of that kind of stuff. And this is very different, where it's like, like you said, like, again, like with the kids, where the grandfather just takes them away, and that's it. They're gone. They're away from the situation, and they're not in any kind of danger. But also, there's a sense too that like Dolph isn't there to show everybody how to do everything. It's more like, hey, we've got this situation under control in terms of like what we want to see happen. We want this casino, but we want to make sure that we keep the money from it, that it's done the right way, so it doesn't harm our people at all. But we've got this gang to deal with, and sort of the odds are stacked against us. So if you want to come in here and take care of that gang for us, that's perfectly fine. And Dolph kind of sees it the same way, right? He's not like, I'm here to show you all how to handle this. It's like, I've got my own vendetta against these people. I'm going to take care of them. And it just happens that and at the same time, I appreciate your hospitality. That's, something that means a lot to me. And I fully respect you as people. And I think, like you said, like, for 2007, it's a little, like you said, nowadays we might be more likely to see that than we would in 2007.
Yeah, and I think too, um there's kind of like a moment too where the native character is killed uh, before the action starts, and Dolph comes and speaks at his funeral. There's a couple people who remark, like, "Oh, I see a lot of him and you," or you carry his same spirit or whatever. So there's almost like this feeling too that maybe this guy's spirit has somehow kind of called to Dolph, or maybe in some way kind of possessing him, and like having him not only avenge his death, but to kind of pick up where he left off and make sure that the town gets their online casino uh, injunction, so they can make money from it, and clean out all the riffraff from the town.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because it's again, I think to your point, what makes this also great that like I think if it was like a Seagal movie, the Seagal movie would not have left anything ambiguous. It would have been Seagal like doing like it probably would have been like some big medicine man kind of thing, with a big ritual and and the kind of and Seagal sitting there, with his fringe coat and all of that stuff, and they would have put all of that stuff in it. I mean, what was the one that was it Into the Sun? Is that the one where like he has like a mystic who's like fighting against another, and it's like there's like voodoo stuff going on where like somebody steals his sweater and it's supposed to like it's like all kinds of stuff like that like Seagal does it for real, right? Like he doesn't hint about it, he doesn't allude to it, whereas this movie to your point, it alludes to it but doesn't go all out, so it kind of gives you a chance to say, hey, maybe that's what the story's going for, maybe it's not, and it allows you to decide if that's what you want the movie to be.
Yeah, and again, that's why we're still talking about it. And I think a lot of some of his other movies, we would have been kind of uh, like, so what else can we talk about today? You know what I mean? I like I said, there's a lot here to kind of like really uh, chew on, and kind of and whether maybe stuff like that wasn't intentional either. Maybe they had a rewrite at the last minute, or maybe they cut out some key scene that explained it all to keep the running time down to like 90 minutes or so. So, I mean, things that we're saying, oh, that's kind of ambiguous. Well, maybe, that scene was on the cutting room floor that explained everything. Who knows?
Well, and this comes back another point, because I think we all talk about this. I think this is one of those things like you and I talk about this. I think a lot of like Ty from Columbus will talk about it. I think pretty much a lot of people that I have on that when we talk kind of direct to video movies, there's that idea of 90 minutes is the key, or like the Corman number is 88 minutes, right? Because it's 11 reels as opposed to if you get to 90 minutes you got to get a 12th reel. So it's he always talk about saving more money that way. I think he talked about that on Real Wild Cinema, the show that Sandra Bernhard used to have on Sunday nights on USA. That 88 minutes, but we talk about the 90-minute rule, getting movies in and out in that time. And I think one of the things this might show is that whether or not that was the case, whether they had a bigger backstory that they put on the cutting room floor and left it ambiguous, I think for people out there making these movies that have this idea of like, yes, there's certain things you don't want to keep ambiguous, but these kinds of backstory things, if you keep them ambiguous, it's not going to hurt us more than adding an extra 10 minutes of movie to explain it will do. And I, for all the direct-to-video filmmakers out there that hear this, I hope if you do hear this, that you keep that in mind as you're editing your movie, that it's better for us to keep it vague and lose 10 minutes of movie than to add that 10 minutes in.
Yeah, and I think too, in the age of Netflix, where every like Netflix movie is about 10 to 15 minutes too long, and I think it's because they want, and I don't know what the movie is called, but I think it was some Natalie Portman movie I read about. I didn't even want to watch after I read this, but they had said something about some executive had them like reiterate the plot every so often, so people wouldn't have to look up from their phone, so they could still follow along with the movie. And it like part of my soul died. I was like, I'm never watching this movie. I think it was, I can't remember what, I think Guy Ritchie directed it. I don't know what it was, but like I was like, I don't want to watch a movie that's going to spoon feed me all these like plot points every so often.
Right. It's like the old radio concept, right? Where if like you do a 4-hour radio show and you reset, at the beginning of the hour because, you've got people that are just getting in their cars now, or it's like, that's good for radio where people are kind of coming in, sort of like the episode is sort of like a river and people pop in at different points. What's kind of funny actually talking about that is that I listen to a sports radio show in Boston with these two sports writers, Felger and Maz, and they do the show, the 4 hour show that way, as like, people are going to just pop in and listen at different points. So we're going to reset at the beginning of the hour and do all those things. But the people who listen are kind of more, people who like me who consume the whole show. And so they'll make jokes about things that happened in previous, shows. And they're like, don't make that joke. Nobody knows what you're talking about. People are, it's like, no, more people know than you think. But it is funny that Netflix is saying like, oh, we're going to make a movie based off this old radio adage that people might be going home at different times, or leaving work at different times, or free from work at different times. And it's like, no, a movie's a whole different experience, right? A movie's not something that you consume in your car while you're going home, and just pick it up when you need to. A movie's supposed to be a sort of a top to bottom experience, or beginning to end experience.
I'm sorry, it was Apple. I just looked it
Oh, it's
up. It
Apple.
was
Okay.
Apple. It was Fountain of Youth,
Oh, okay.
which was the movie.
Oh, right. Which
Was, I guess, it was kind of like a national treasure kind of thing, but at the same
right.
time, like they had to they made them like reiterate every plot point so they knew why they were going through the secret tunnel so they could get to the secret. And I remember reading that. I was like, oh my god, like no, I'm good. I don't need to see that one.
This is a really great point, though, too, that we never really think about, is that with this consolidation of media that we're experiencing right now, when a company like Apple is making a movie, the big thing for them, of course, is their Apple products. That's the whole point, is that these things are supposed to drive you to the Apple products. And so what the movies themselves make isn't as big a deal. And so if you can watch this movie while you're using your phone, that keeps you on your phone, which keeps you connected to Apple. And I guess Netflix is probably a little different, because Netflix, to your point, like, as you mentioned, that it wasn't Netflix, it was Apple, right? Netflix doesn't really have that kind of skin in the game, but for them, their thing is they want you to keep watching Netflix. They want you to, when the movie's over, you watch the next one. And I do wonder if that's what the length is part of. I don't know if that's it, but I wonder if that's part of it, that like if the movie goes on longer, there's a bigger chance that maybe you'll fall asleep and watch something else. I don't know what the thing is with that, but it is one of these things now that we're dealing with. I mean, back in the, when it was Robert Evans and Paramount, he had to, deal with what was it, the Gulf and Western Oil Company or whatever, that would, want to make sure the movies were good on a certain level, but he was able to just make movies, and I wonder, I wonder if you could make a Rosemary's, I mean, yes, you've got like A24 and places like that, you could make a Rosemary's Baby or something like that, but it's something I'd never really considered before, that, yeah, if Apple is making your movie, they want you to be looking on your phone while you're watching the movie.
Yeah, and so you can take a call on your Apple Watch, and be using all their Apple products while sitting up on your Apple TV. This just probably thoroughly disposable movie, which and maybe who knows, maybe it's good, maybe it's not the kind of thing where it's as bad as it sounds, because I mean there are so many movies you can tell where there's a line here and there that's been like ADR about, like, why are we here? Oh, we have to find this so we can this map so we can go find the key. And there are moments like that in every movie, but like when I heard like they like specifically asked them to do it every so often, I was like, wow, that was something else.
Right. Well, because the other problem is that Hollywood is just every other industry right now. They're trying to figure out what to do with Gen Z, right? They don't know how to get Gen Z. And I think about our generation. I guess we're kind of the end of Gen X, or we're kind of begin in between Gen X and millennial. But one of the things I think about with movies, and I do think this is maybe qualifies with Gen Z as well, is that the thing about movies for our generation growing up in the 80s was that you had these directors, Spielberg, Lucas, whoever, Zemeckis, Donner. They were trying to make magic on the screen. I always talk about this. These movies that we watched, E.T., Back to the Future, Superman, all of these things. Jaws, I think, was probably the first one of those. They wanted to make magic on the screen, so you'd sit and watch those because you wanted to experience this magic, whether you're watching it at home on TV or if you were old enough to go see it in the theater. And one of the things, and I don't know if maybe you've experienced this, I know with your daughter, but I've heard that Gen Z, which is a little bit older, they been turning to more of those 80s movies. Like, they appreciate those movies as well, which, if I'm Hollywood, it's like, well, yeah, just keep making. Don't try to make the modern version of Ghostbusters. Try to recreate that magic that was being made with those movies.
Yeah, well, actually, Regal the past couple months they've been doing like classic movies on the big screen.
Yeah.
More of those that we have like actual like new releases, which maybe that tells you the state of movies. I
Right.
don't know, um, but like we saw Psycho, we saw uh, Clockwork Orange, we saw like all these classics that that yeah I have the 4K at home, we could do it, but to go out in the theater, with Friday the 13th part 3, they play that in 3D, and I mean that brought the house down. So
Right.
you don't get that response, sitting on the couch. And it's hard to say where Hollywood's going, because you see like all these anime movies now are opening number one, like Demon Slayer and Chainsaw Man, and I mean they're like outgrossing like Oscar bait movies like One Battle After Another and the Springsteen movie, and it's it's a I think Hollywood, either they are or they should be quaking in their boots, because it's when Hollywood doesn't know what to do next, then uh, I think there's more of an opportunity to make things a little bit weirder, a little bit kind of against the grain. So maybe there's an opportunity for more filmmakers to make something kind of akin to what they were doing in the 70s, because what the current model doesn't seem to be really thriving.
Well, that's a great point, because we kind of grew up with a similar situation where, you had the 80s. Again, we talked about, that moment where the early into the mid 80s, where you had these directors making these really great movies. And then it kind of becomes more blockbuster focused from the late 80s into the early 90s. And then you get this independent boom that happens where, Quentin Tarantino with Pulp Fiction, Clerks. I was trying to think of some of the other ones from that time, but it was kind of this thing. I mean, I know for me, I became much more bougie in the 90s, where I was like, I'm either watching, these indie art house movies, or I'm watching DTV stuff, but I'm not watching the big blockbusters. I finally saw Face Off recently. I hadn't, had never seen it before, because it just, was one of those ones that I was just like, well, I don't want to see Face Off. I'm too good for that. But we did get that indie boom in the 90s, and it would be interesting to see if the 2020s. I mean, 'cause it's kind of. I mean, I guess it's a little late for it, because I think no, because 94, right, was Pulp Fiction, so I guess it was, it did happen around that time. So maybe that's something that we see. Maybe something like Sinners or whatever is like a harbinger of something that's going to happen.
Yeah, Sinners is interesting, because it's one of those that doesn't really fit into any kind of box. It's a vampire movie, but it's more of a uh, period gangster movie, and and while I wasn't really particularly taken by it, its success is very interesting, because it shows that I think audiences want something different. And and of course, the Lilo and Stitch and the Captain America reboots and all this stuff is still going to be, probably top of the list. But it's interesting to see like movies like that kind of sneak in and kind of make Hollywood really scratch their heads.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That I think too. I remember when Deadpool and Wolverine came out. That fall, the local indie theater here. I don't know if it's an indie theater, because it's owned by Landmark Cinema, so I think it's the Ritz Theater here in Philadelphia. But they played Blade, and I would say it was probably like a good 2/3 full, and I would say out of the ratio of people that are watching it, probably like half were our age who saw Blade when it first came out, and then the other half were younger fans who were curious about this after seeing Deadpool and Wolverine. And yeah, so I thought that was a really cool thing to see. But I also think too that it's like, you know, it, if Blade can be re-released and sell out 2/3 of an indie theater, like yeah, wouldn't an indie movie that's new possibly be able to do that if it's marketed correctly, and or like you said, like a Sinners, it's like it so yeah, I wonder. I mean, everybody was talking about Naked Gun, like everybody wanted that one to be successful. I wonder if it's not so much about Naked Gun being successful as just the fact that Naked Gun was made and it was in the theater, or Sinners was made and it was in the theater, if that's enough to sort of change it a little bit.
Well, I think with the rise of like these kind of retro classic screenings, the thing is like things are so expensive now.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and a lot of times these retro screenings are $10. You've got maybe, you've got to get a sitter, you've got to, go out to eat as well, or you've got all these things. It takes a lot to get like a family out, and it's very expensive. But if you can say, hey, we're going to go see Psycho tonight,
Right.
one, the movie's going to be awesome.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like you already checked that box. You're like, okay, at least whatever we see tonight's not going to suck. So we've spent our money on something worthwhile that's fun to see in a theater with a packed house. So I think that's kind of why you're seeing a lot of these retro screenings, and it happened, I think, starting in the pandemic, where people were like, oh, we'll put the Goonies or all these kind of 80s movies out. And I think a lot what happened was, I think they were like, oh, we'll show anything, and people will come see it. But I think what they're seeing now is that there is a market for these screenings. And I think, like you said, whether it's me and my daughter, like somebody introducing a classic to the next generation, or just movie lovers in general that want that communal experience, I think maybe one day we'll have Missionary Man in the theater. Hopefully.
Exactly.
See how that plays with the packed house.
Yes. No. You bring up a point that I hadn't considered before, because my wife and I are talking about going to see Uncle Buck, that's playing here on the 18th of November, and she doesn't really go out to the movie. She's not really she doesn't really do that, and so. But she loves Uncle Buck. It's one of her favorites, and I think we usually watch it on Thanksgiving. We like do Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Uncle Buck. It's a couple of John Candy movies, but that's like. To your point, like if I was trying to convince her, like, oh, this Marvel movie was a ton of fun, or this new Superman was a lot of fun, I think she'd look at me like, well, we had fun watching Superman 3 on TV here. I don't really know if I want to see this new Superman. I don't know if that really is going to do anything for me. But Uncle Buck, like you said, I know Uncle Buck's great. I love Uncle Buck. I want to see it in the theater again. That's great, and so. Yeah, that's probably a good point. That it's going to get people out because they already know it's going to be good.
Yeah, and I a lot of the times too, and it's kind of interesting too, because this kind of dates me, and I'm sure you'll
Right.
appreciate this. With in my day, we went through having to watch something that was cropped or pan and scanned, so you never really got to see the full picture until, like, DVDs came out and they letterbox everything, and then now with TVs being rectangles, like that's like a thing of the past. So it was always cool when they would do these retro screenings. Like I know when they did when Star Wars came back out in the theater, it was like just seeing the full picture on the big screen was a big deal. But I mean, now a lot of times, people have affordable, good setups for TVs, whether it's Blu-ray or and I think TVs are kind of affordable to the point where you can have a really, really good setup and still want to go to the theater to see the same movie that you have at home, just because it gets you out of the house. It gets you kind of you can get a big group of people, and you have that shared experience.
Yeah, well, that's another great point too, because movies are so expensive nowadays, and like you were saying, the retro ones are a little cheaper a lot of times, especially if they're in an indie theater, they're going to be cheaper. But also that there's that event quality to them. That like, oh, this is a movie that we've always wanted to see on the big screen. Like Blade. Blade got me out. I usually go to an early Saturday morning matinee. That's like what I do to go see a movie. That's usually Saturday morning. So for a movie to get me to go to a 7 p.m. weeknight, evening showing, it's got to be something special like Blade. And so, yeah, but like that's what's going to get everybody to go do an event. I think the last time I saw a movie in a big group was a long time ago. It was like over 10 years ago now, which is kind of crazy to admit, but it was Sharknado 2 playing, the riff tracks live. It was playing in the theater here in Philadelphia, and my friend from college, he was here with his wife at the time, and then we had another friend from college with his wife visiting. So it was like the six of us all went, as a big group to go see, Sharknado 2 being, riffed by the riff tracks guys. But it's like an event. It's a kind of a thing, and like to your point too, like that's going to be good, right? You're going to go see that and have a great time with it. Yeah, it's a completely different vibe now, and to your point too about like we're talking about Missionary Man here. It's like when you've got so many streaming options and so many things you could watch on your TV, it's like, okay, do I want to go out and spend, $20 a ticket? And so it's a family of four. That's $80 right there. And then you got to buy, popcorn and all that stuff. That's usually $20 a person at best. As that's another. So you're closing in on $200. Whereas if you've got the movie for free on Tubi, you order, and even if you ordered like Uber Eats, where it's like it's going to be expensive, it's like $80 or $100 for a family. You're still out, you're still saving $100 by doing that, and nobody has to leave. Everybody can just hang out in their pajamas and watch the movie there. And so the movie theater, yeah, it's like the film industry, they keep trying to create these event movies to get people out of the house to watch them. But I wonder if that's the goal. I wonder if maybe it's just to, get people to maybe lower the prices on tickets, maybe do cheap matinees or cheap Tuesday night movies or something like that, and get people out to just, check out a movie just to kind of see it.
Yeah. And I think too, it's just one of those things where some of the movies that are being offered, it's like you're starting to see like it's almost like there's no star vehicles anymore. There's no like I think that even The Rock is like trying to do like an Oscar bait kind of movie,
Right.
whereas before it was like here's a movie with The Rock basically playing The Rock, even those movies are kind of going to straight to streaming, like Red One and Red Notice, like these movies that would probably be a tentpole movie is now at home. So I think there's a line that's kind of being blurred with streamers that want these kind of tentpole movies, but when the same studio puts it in the theater, nobody shows up. Everybody's kind of like saying, "Huh, what?" So it's like I said, it's just a strange time, and it doesn't help that the window from theatrical release to streaming for some movies is like weeks, like 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's one that always gets me. Is that because for me again, I usually have to do a Saturday morning matinee, and if my Saturday mornings are filled with other things, like if I'm recording other podcasts or something like that, then I can't go. And so then if it's like 3 weeks out, I was going through your site a little bit before our recording here, and I saw you reviewed Tron Ares. And I was recording another podcast over the past weekend, the Lambcast podcast, and somebody mentioned like, oh, they needed to get out and see Tron Ares. Somebody else was like, you better go now because it's going to be out of the theater soon. And it's like, wow, yeah, it's a good, it's like a Tron Ares probably would have lasted the whole summer back when we were younger. You would have had at least a good 2 months to see it. And also, it would have been one of those movies that started in the big theater and then made its way down to those sort of affiliate theaters, which don't exist to the same level anymore either. So that was another piece of it. You'd be able to go to another theater that would have it like a month later and see it. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where I'll probably miss Tron Ares. I'll have to wait till it's on Disney Plus because I won't be able to make it to the theater in time.
Yeah, and I mean the same thing kind of happened with me with one battle after another. Like for 2 weeks there, my daughter had driver's ed every night, so we were going back and forth, and then like on the weekend, I work, and she was tired from doing driving and doing school on top of it, and we're like, okay, we'll see it next week. We'll see it next week, and then next week became, well, it's out of the theater now, and it was only out for like 3 weeks, and it was like, I was like, wow, I think this is the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie since the first one I probably won't get to see. Now, if it's nominated for Oscars, I'm sure they'll bring it back out again, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of like a blink and you miss it. Like I saw Spinal Tap 2 like the week it came out, then it was gone the next week. So it's one of those things where it's almost like whack-a-mole. Right. You don't know what's going to stay out and what's going to keep.
Yeah. Well, and I remember too, was it The Working Man, the Statham movie, when that one came out? People were talking about going to see that in the theater, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll go check that out in the theater. That could be kind of a fun one. And the only showings that it had were late at night in Philadelphia. It was like 10 p.m. showings, 8 p.m. showings, things like that. It's like, well, I really can't go to that because we don't have a car here. We don't drive. So it's like I got to take public transportation back. And the later you take that back, or I got to get an Uber. So you're tacking on an extra, $25, $30, depending. And it's just like, well, it's not worth it. I'm just going to wait till it's available on Amazon, or I can even rent it for $5 when it gets on there. So it's that's the other piece of it, right? Is that like it's a limited window, but then also what kind of showings? The big blockbusters, they start at 9:30, 10 in the morning, and they go all night, and so you can pick any time that works for you. But if it's like a limited release, it's not there as much.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing too. And I was gonna go see one battle after the other after another, and I think it's more because it's a 3-hour movie. I had looked on Friday for a Tuesday show, and it said there was like a 6 o'clock show. I'm like, oh well, I can do that. And then when it came to Tuesday, I was like, well, let me just check it just to make sure. And they had taken the show off completely because I think they had like one of the anime movies or whatever was coming out that week, and they just needed extra theaters because it had sold out. So I was like, yeah, that I missed my one chance to see it, but
Right.
uh, but yeah, like I said, it's just kind of it, it's just like I said, it's just strange times to be a movie fan and kind of love that theatrical experience, but also likes the availability of streaming. And I say availability because uh, you almost have to subscribe to everything to even wet your beak with all the new releases now. It is a little daunting to keep up with everything, but uh, yeah, it's just. But then again, half the time I'll just go on Tubi anyway, and that's for free. So
Right, right. Yeah, I always joke it's like a 3 card Monty kind of thing, right? Where it's like, oh, it's on this streamer. Oh no, it's on another streamer. And like Tubi, for example. Yeah, I mean, one of the things with Tubi with the Dolph movies is that for the most part they stay consistent. Like I think Missionary Man has been on Tubi for years now, and Detention. I think there's certain ones that have just always been on there, and you never have to worry about them going away. But then like there's other movies that you like the Seagal ones for some reason I've never understood this, but certain Seagal ones come and go. And it's like, why are they coming and going? Like, what's happening with these Seagal movies?
yeah, I don't know if that's has to do with that. I think when he had like a bunch of like either Sony or Lionsgate
Yeah,
ones or something. So sometimes if they show up on like the Sony movie channel or something like that, they'll take it off streaming and just show it on television. But then it's usually, it always get those notices. It's like, on Tubi is like, oh, disappearing in 7 days. I'm like, what? Like this has been on for like forever, and then like 8 days later, it's back.
right.
For whatever reason, it was gone for one day, but now it's back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always a trip with that kind of thing. Or like, yeah, there's a movie that like I'll miss, and then it'll come back, and then like there's this one this Scott Adkins movie, Incoming, I think is what it's called, where he goes to this like space station, and he's I think he's a bad guy. There's a woman who's like a scientist or whatever that he's attacking, but I watched it. And then it got removed before I went to review it, and now it's like 3 or 4 years later, it's finally back. And I was like, "Oh boy, I better get some images now and review it." But that's like it's been 4 years. I probably need to watch it again. But it's like, but it was one of those things where it just randomly reappeared in my Tubi queue. Like I just look because that's the other thing too, right? Is if you have something in your queue and it gets removed, they put it back in your queue when it comes back.
Which is good because a lot of the streamers don't do that.
Yeah,
So that's refreshing. But I remember, I think it was Hitman Agent 47. I think I started watching it like on the 31st of something on Hulu, and then I sat down on the first and it had been taken off.
right.
And I was like, how? And then, but luckily, like 3 months later, it showed up on like Tubi or something. It was, or maybe Paramount or something. It showed up on some other random one. I was like, okay, well, finally got to finish it. It wasn't worth the wait, but
Yeah, right. Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
always the thing. Like, I'm gonna find something that like I've been waiting to see, and then get halfway through it, fall asleep on it, then the next day it's gone.
Yeah, it just yeah,
But
like you said, it's
FOMO is real.
right. Exactly. Exactly. For sure. Well. Yeah. Well. Anything. I guess we kind of got a little bit off of Missionary Man, but we kind of also I think we talked a good amount about it. Was there anything else on Missionary Man that you wanted to mention?
I mean, at the risk of spoiling the end, that one of those things that we talked about was where uh, it goes against the grain. Is where the big bad guy winds up arrested in the back of a police car, kind of crying to himself. There's no big moment where, like you said, like Dolph round kicks him into a bed of spikes, or
Right.
blows his car up or anything. He just kind of they let the law handle him. So it was another one of those little curveballs that I appreciated.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there because, like you said, I think they got John Enos and thought, okay, let's do something with him instead, or to your point, like they looked at it and was like, man, this guy fighting Dolph at the end is not going to work. I don't like it, you have to do the Wesley Garrett where he's got like the poker or something that he's swinging, whatever it was that he was using to attack a Dalton with. But yeah, it was like kind of a fun twist because, like you said, like. He's not killed. He kind of has a confrontation with Chalk, but then that's it. He's arrested at the end there. That was like you said, it was a good twist, especially as Dolph was riding off into the sunset.
Yeah, and like if anybody out there is going through like Dolph's filmography, like in that era, I'd probably go, Command Performance or Detention or uh, uh, but before I'd get to this one, but it's definitely interesting, and there's definitely I think if you have an appreciation for kind of pseudo spaghetti westerns or any kind of kind of movies that don't really fit into like the typical genre, I think you'll get something out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think especially like we were talking about Tubi, Dolph has enough movies on Tubi that you could do a whole month of Dolph and not repeat a movie. You could do like a Dolph movie a day for a month, and get through all
Dolph December,
right.
there you go.
Dolph December, exactly. It's perfect. Yeah. I remember I came up with this concept because you were doing Amityville April on when you were doing Tubi movies a couple of years ago, and I was like, I wonder if you could do 30 if they have 30 Amityville movies on Tubi, and they did. If you type in Amityville, at least at that time there was 30 movies. So I have this joke about who has enough movies that you could get through a whole month of their movies. Like you could do a month of them, and Dolph is one of those people. But this movie is, I think, for people that are scrolling Dolph, either if you haven't seen it in a while or if you've never seen it before, it's a fascinating entry into his DTV filmography and worth checking out.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your site, because I was looking, some of your recent reviews. When you were on, I think one of the most popular episodes that you've done, and actually, it's kind of funny that it's one of the most popular ones you've done because when I first released it, it didn't do so great to start with. It didn't have as many downloads to start with, but now it's up there. It was when we talked about Mail Order Murder, the Wave movie documentary, and I was kind of surprised to see that they have a new movie out.
Yeah, I just on a lark, I happened to be scrolling Facebook, and they had Wave. I follow Wave on Facebook, and they announced that they had their first movie, feature length movie, but that uses AI. And for me, I'm a very independent minded person, and I'm very anti AI and anything anything in the entertainment realm or artistic realm. And but there's something about wave movies using AI that I was like, I have to see that. And if anybody's unfamiliar with Wave, they're out of South Jersey, and they make low budget, basically bondage horror movies. And this one is called the Women Eaters, two exclamation marks. Because you have to like scream a Wave title because it's always like sorority slaughter, it's always like eaten alive, it's always but the premise of this movie is I mean, heck, I think Edgar Allan Poe himself can think of something this great. Giant worms become giant because they only eat estrogen, which means they can only eat women. And so they're in Africa, and this lab thinks that, well, because they're full of estrogen, we can cure menopause by doing something with these worms. We never find out because it's just like this AI image, like a file photo of like this doctor like looking at this terrible CGI worm, and it's amazing. I love it. So of course the worm gets out of its lab, and it goes around just eating half naked women for 47 minutes, and it's amazing. And it's a very much like a wave movie, even though they do use AI for some scenes. And these scenes are like if you've ever seen any Neil Breen movie, they make Neil Breen look like Citizen Kane. And it's just like I just I think it's the Hollywood's first CG or AI death by quicksand scene, and it's just something to it's a sight to behold, and it's why that these kinds of movies. That's why I watch everything, because I don't want anything to kind of slip through the cracks. And when I tell you I haven't laughed harder at a movie in quite a while, uh, that's the truth, and that's why I continue to just kind of plumb the depths of Wave.
Yeah, Wave is such a really great. I mean, what they did, what their whole kind of approach, was it Gary Whitson? Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Where it's like, let's. I want to be able to make these movies. I want to be able to make my own movies. Make them. Make them however I want to make them. In the past, I kind of remember, he talked about like, reading like old comics where like, old kind of pulpy things where women would be kidnapped or something like that. But really, it was more like, let's put it out there to the fans and say, tell me what you want in a movie. And they're like, oh, we want to see women getting strangled, and we want to see women being tied up and electrocuted, or dying in quicksand. It's like, okay, let me just make a movie, and then I'll just include these elements in it, and people will buy it, which they did. And the fact that, I mean, these, Wave started in like the late 80s, early 90s, right?
Yeah, late 80s.
Yeah. And they're still making movies, 20, here in 2025. And I mean, you see Debbie D and Tina
She's
Kraus.
in it.
Yeah.
Yep, they're both in this one, and I mean they still look great, um, and it's like almost kind of like that feeling of it's like, let's put on a show. Let's we have our repertory theater of reliable actors that we use year in year out, and it's always nice to see them pop up in these movies, and especially uh, you know being menaced by CGI worms. So
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, because like, it's funny whenever I see Debbie D or Laura Giglio. Also, I think, is that her last? Is that how you say her last name?
yep,
Giglio.
she's in it too. Yep,
Yeah,
all the big stars are pretty much there.
yeah. They have like this thick South Jersey, South Philly accent. It's just so great, like seeing them talking about whatever. But yet, I mean, Tina Kraus and Debbie D, I see them in like other horror movies. They work for other they do other stuff, and so it's always kind of fun to see them in other things, but then like coming back to doing Wave stuff, and the fact that they're still at it all these years later. That the whole group, and then that hey, let's try out this AI stuff and just put it in the movie. It's just like almost like kind of like a bouillabaisse approach, as opposed, like I agree with you about like using AI for entertainment purposes. I'm usually against it, but it's a fascinating concept in a Wave movie.
Yeah, it's like, would I feel the same if Disney was doing it? You know,
Right.
yes. But when AI is being used to get half naked women into the sprawling mall of a CGI worm, I can't really fault it. I mean, isn't that what they say though? Like it's how we use the technology that's the problem, and not the technology itself.
Right, right, exactly. No, that's a great
So
point.
if it's being used for that purpose, I say it's okay.
Well, because I think the other thing too is that when it's like a really low budget indie kind of thing, I mean, I guess yes, they could pay someone to render the graphics or something like that, but it's usually going to be well outside of their budget. And so for them to kind of say like, oh, let's see this what this AI stuff does and put it in the movie, it's different from Disney being like, oh, we're going to cut corners, or we're going to maximize profits by because I think Gary Whitson's not trying to maximize profits by like by using AI, but like Disney, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to cut out like this whole team of animators by using AI. It's like, okay, that's a little bit more sinister than Gary Whitson. He doesn't have the ability to. I mean, I guess there are independent animators, maybe. I don't know. It's one of the things I know with my books, and I know you're probably similar, right? Where I don't pay anybody to make my books, but I make my covers myself. I shouldn't say make my books, but make the covers. But like I've always thought, like if I did AI to make my cover, I'd probably be taking money from somebody that could be making my book making my book cover, and could be making some money off of that. So it's one thing to make it myself and use all the pieces on Canva to do it. But yeah, I feel like with Gary Whitson, it's not a sinister thing when he's using it.
No, because it has his fingerprints all over it. He's using AI only the way that Gary Whitson could use it.
Right.
And most people would use this technology to create like a vast space field with planets and swirling the Milky Way and like all these like far off lands and stuff. No, he's using it for a scene where a worm slithers and eats a woman, and it's obvious that um, the five people in the hunting party are just the same guy, just slightly different. And it's one of those things where you like only he would use it in that manner at that time of the movie, in that place of the movie, for that reason. It just checks all the boxes, and you're just like I said, as a bad movie fan, I just live for those moments, and now I have a new moment to live for.
Right. No, I totally agree. Now that's when you can only get on their site, right? You can get the DVD or the
Right.
digital
I
download.
had to mail order that one, but there are a few here and there. Like I think you can find on YouTube, like their earlier ones, like Eaten Alive, A Tasteful Revenge, which we talked about, which is an amazing. Uh, I call it outlaw art because I don't. To call it a motion picture, I don't know that, but it's art that doesn't follow any rules known in the known universe. So like, yeah, like I call that one outlaw, or I wouldn't say The Women Eaters is quite to that level, but it does have some moments where your jaw will just hit the floor, which is what you hope for when you watch a wave movie anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like, with the wave movies too, because they're kind of a quantity over quality kind of approach as well. Because they kind of just kick them out, and you might get some
Absolutely.
where it's sort of like there's just sort of repetition of women getting strangled, women getting stabbed or something like that, and it's like there's not a lot of plot. It's just like some guy kind of lumbering around, who's just killing all these women, and it's like maybe there's a moment where they change or something like that. But then you'll just get this one where you're just like, oh yeah, that's a really interesting one, and it's like this is a trip, and it still has the same elements that the other ones have, but the stuff that's going on around it is just so trippy. And the other thing I think too is that the 80s and 90s ones, now that we're getting we're getting further from the 80s and 90s, there's the nostalgia factor as well, because unlike movies that have this polish to them, where they're using elements of things that are kind of more stage elements, and every once in a while you'll get like something that's really shot, that's like real, really existed as it did back then. But with the wave movies, it's like if they're driving, if like some guy has kidnapped a woman and he's driving her from one place to another, you're getting a glimpse of South Jersey in 1992 or whatever it is that you probably can't find unless somebody's got home movies or something like that of it.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also like I think, and like you said, there's that nostalgic factor. Like you could put a filter on a camera or like an iPhone to make it look like a camcorder from the 80s, but the eye knows that like the only way to replicate that is by watching an 80s shot on video horror movie. It doesn't matter how many, how high class the filter is. Like you can just tell that it's not of the era, and I think that's part of the charm for these movies. And I think shot on video movies in general, I think when they were coming out like the 80s and 90s, like I I kind of wouldn't say turn my nose up, but if I have my choice between a shot on video and a shot on film horror movie, I go for that one. But I think now, and there's a certain timelessness about it when it's shot like that. Like when you see that era depicted on film, it's I don't know. It seems dated, but like when you see it shot on video, it's like a time capsule. It's like this is how exactly how it was back then, and there's no kind of like uh, filter to it. There's no cleaning it up. With a 35 millimeter camera, it's all there in grainy glory.
Yeah, it's like, when you watch something on YouTube and somebody, or not on YouTube, on Instagram, and somebody posts like a reel or something of like a news report, of like, oh, look at, all these kids, like, there was one I saw recently of a woman like winning a shopping spree at a local grocery store in the Philly area here, and it was the same grocery store. My wife and I, we lived in the suburbs. We went to that same grocery store. Of course, like completely different, but like to see it like that, and like, hear everybody speaking with their accents and everything, and like seeing what the products look like and all of that. It's the kind of thing that, like, if somebody was trying to make a movie set in that time, they wouldn't be able to pull it off. But you can watch those like old news things, or you can watch these shot on VHS movies, and feel like you're getting a capsule of a time that, like, you're like, oh yeah. And I think the other thing too is that it's almost like a sense of like your memory kind of comes back in a way where it's like, when I watch movies, I'm like, was it like that? What do I remember it like that? But when I watch it on a wave movie, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that all makes sense.
Yeah, there's like just something about it that, like, if you watch like a film, shot on film movie from that era, it just seems like manufactured, I guess is the word. Uh, even if they just used, went into a grocery store and filmed it, but when you see it on video, maybe it is at home video essence. Maybe it's just people our age that are used to watching videos, like, home movies from Christmas or whatever, through that lens of that's kind of how our memories kind of look anyway, because we watch so many uh camcorder Christmas videos and birthdays and all that stuff. So maybe our generation just kind of programmed that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, talking about Eaten Alive, A Tasteful Revenge, where you get all these moments that happen inside an office, and it just looks like an office that you would go to in the, what was it like? That was probably like more like late '90s, I think, that one, right? Like mid to late, like
Yeah, I think that's 99.
99. Yeah. So it looks like that, where it's like, you watch an erotic thriller from that same time period, and it's like, the frosted glass, and it's like the palm trees, and like the little palm plants and things like that, and you're just like, yeah, I mean, it kind of represents an office that you would go to, but it looks so much nicer on it, like it's so much more Hollywood. I don't know if Hollywood's the right term, but it's like it looks more
Right.
sophisticated, and it's supposed to evoke some kind of sexiness, right? Because obviously, I don't remember any office I went to where women wore the short skirts that they wore in erotic thrillers, where they're all hooking up and stuff. But it's that idea that, like, these wave movies, you see it exactly as it was, and it's like, yeah, I remember going into offices like that, going to the doctors or something.
Yeah, it's just all wood paneling and Formica.
Right, exactly, yeah. And it's like one of them, it's like one of those deals where, like, maybe somebody who was friends with Gary Whitson was like, yeah, you can use our office tonight, and they go in and shoot the scenes and everything. And I mean, who knows, maybe one of the actors was working at that place, and and yeah, when everybody's gone, my boss said we can go in there and film, and so they just go in and film. That's it, as opposed to, like, an erotic thriller where it's like, okay, this studio has an office set that we can use for this amount of time, so let's go do that. We'll go shoot over there. Or there's this one office in town that everybody uses to shoot at, so we'll go there. And you get that look too, right? Where it's like every erotic thriller office looks the same. It all has the same kind of look to it, and it's like there's Jan Michael Vincent or whoever's sitting behind the table. Like, it's like the same place.
Venetian blinds,
Yeah, frosted glass, all that stuff. Yeah, there's a rawness to these wave movies, and it is kind of a funny idea. We wouldn't necessarily associate AI with that kind of rawness, but the fact that Gary Whitson is doing it in a wave film is so fascinating.
yeah, it's like that juxtaposition of just uh, realism and totally uh, unrealism. I guess if that's a word, but like it's just like surreal. It's maybe that's the best word, is to just to see these two kind of aesthetics kind of going together like oil and water, but because it's wave. Oil and water is kind of their bread and butter. So I don't know.
Well, because then also, I mean, again, whether it's Tina Kraus or Debbie D or Laura Giglio, where it's like Pamela Such is another, where it's like they seem to be the ones that married the oil and water of it. There's this a sort of the way that they were game for whatever was happening in these movies and just went for it and just did it. It kind of makes the whole thing come together in a way that I don't think, and I guess it's probably the reason why he works with them all the time. Like they're willing to keep doing these movies and they're willing to be game to do all of this stuff and be part of it. That they bring the whole thing together and it creates a sort of this fascination that you can enjoy, especially outside of the sort of the kink factor of it. There's sort of another level to the wildness.
Yeah, and I think that might keep some people at arm's length from some of these movies, as the fact that they're mostly glorified bondage movies,
Right.
but there is a like I say, some of them like really kind of are just kind of like I said, like outlaw art. It's just that it's what is art? Well, I know it when I see it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. But there's some, there are some that kind of wallow into more of the excess than others. But some of them, like I said, to have the first minute of the movie tell you that these worms only eat estrogen, and we're going to use them to put an end to menopause.
Right.
That's the first minute of the movie. You're like, if you're not got your safety belts fastened already, it's like you already know what you're dealing with, and it's glorious.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I talk about this with the PM movies where it's like, the guys that made them, Richard Pepin and Joseph Merhi, they wanted to kind of just be making movies. That was their whole thing. They wanted to be filmmakers, and they found this ability to, if they injected enough action in the film every 10 to 15 minutes, they could make their movie whatever they wanted it to be. They could make a sci-fi movie, or a rom-com, or a kids movie, anything like that, as long as they had that action within there. And from the cable TV standpoint, if you tune into a PM movie, that you're not going to be any longer than 10 minutes without an action sequence. So if you just tune in, you're like, oh, what is this movie about? You're going to get a car flipping over and exploding, and you're like, yeah, all right, I'll watch the last hour of this movie. And I think I wonder if the wave movies, I never really thought about this before with the wave movies, but to your point about how, you rent a movie from the video store in the 80s and 90s, and you discover it's a shot on video movie, and you're like, oh man, I feel like I got ripped off here. My $3 or my buy one get one on Tuesday nights, I wasted it on this. But then if you get those kink elements, if you're into the kink elements, you're like, oh, wait a second, okay, no, this is good, I'll watch more of those. And I wonder if it was a similar thing for Gary Whitson, where it was like, this is what keeps my movies going. I can make whatever movies I want. I can make these, these sci-fi thrillers that I want, or these sort of more hard-boiled detective things that I like to do, or whatever the craziness is that I want to do. If I've got these elements mixed in, people won't turn off and be angry that they watched a shot on video movie. They'll accept the shot on video movie.
And it kind of goes, kind of back to the, quantity versus quality. The more times you're at bat, the greater your chances to hit a home run.
Yeah.
And there are some, that are, kind of eye rolling, or, but, when it hits that sweet spot of just kind of unbridled insanity, it's just like, it's a different level. Like if, if somebody was just starting out wanting to get into like low budget horror movies, I would not, this isn't like the first level. You would, you want to get, to maybe your purple belt or your green belt in movie watching karate before you get to the wave movies, but yeah, like, like if you thought, Ed Wood was the only master of kind of like, WTF cinema, I mean, Gary Whitson is right there, because there, I don't know if love is the right word, but he's putting out exactly, I think, the kind of thing he wants to put out. And whether if it's somebody else's script that he's kind of taking the money for and kind of putting their fetishes into the film. I think with all is said and done, it's got to go through his lens. So it's getting processed through his brain and putting onto it while it's being put on onto video. And I think it's that crucial element that kind of turns that spins the yarn into gold.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's such good stuff. And so the best way to find those movies is on the website, which I think is like Wave Productions. Is that what waveproductions.com?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, you could just look Wave Movies, Gary Whitson. Like I said, there's a handful that are on YouTube. I think Internet Archive, but definitely throw Gary some money. I especially if you want the I wouldn't say it's the best movie of the year, but the Women Eaters is definitely the best giant worm eating movie of the year, and probably the last decade. And I saw Dune too, so
Right, exactly. Yes, no, I agree as well. So yeah, definitely worth supporting indie for that for sure. Definitely.
yeah, definitely. You're supporting indie filmmaking. And I think what that movie cost me. It was like a night out at the cinema, and I wouldn't have it either way. And I got to, like, basically everybody has come to my house. I'm like, hey, wait, you got 5 minutes? Check this out. And I show them the scene where the worm rises up and we'll say bites a lady in a very private area, and then then it gets crazy from there.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's a definitely good. Yeah, well, yeah, waveproductions.com, look up Wave Movies and you'll find it. And definitely, yeah, it's definitely worth supporting. You go to the website, you're going to see some interesting stuff for their movies there. So, yeah, but don't be alarmed. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, I don't know if it's safe for work, but it's
Right?
it's 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 fun for after work.
Yes, don't look this up on your work computer. Absolutely not. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Perfect. All right. So as we're wrapping up here, Mitch, anything that you wanted to plug?
Just the website. I got the video vacuum at blogspot.com. Right now I'm doing 31 days of Horrorween, where I'm watching a mess of horror movies, and then into November I'll continue that theme and for something that's called Halloween Hangover, where I just basically any horror movie that's been on my watch list and my queue, I just try to trim those lists down and try to watch everything horror related, and then usually go back to normal in December. But normal for me is not normal for most people.
Right.
But and then I also have my latest book is the Kung Fu Companion, the Chop Saki movie guide, where I watch a bunch of kung fu movies of different genres, eras, stars. Just kind of, just give you my opinions, what I think. Try to trace, the genre overall, and try to highlight some of the best and the worst and the in between. And I'm working on a new book. I don't know. It'll probably be sometime next year, but it's looking like it's just going to be a grab bag of uh, this, that, and the other, which is typically a little bit more fun to write because I can kind of, I'm not spread too thin. I can kind of go where my muse takes me. But yeah, hopefully that should be out next year.
Excellent. Yeah, I always say what your Kung Fu Companion is that, and the link to that is going to be in the podcast description, so people can check that out. With the availability of martial arts movies now, whether it's Tubi or even YouTube, state channels like Wu Tang, I think is one of them, Wu Tang channel, that like they post so many of these movies are available now. And what I love is being able to go through your guide and being like, okay, is this the one I want to watch, or is this, should I check out another one, or what happens in this one that makes it worth checking out? I mean, Severin also, right? Was it Severin that put out the
Bruce Lee,
yeah.
the clones, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so your guide is really great with the availability of all this stuff now. It's great to have your guide there to kind of look through and be like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll check this one out, or even just to be like, oh, what's one that I want to watch tonight? I'll kind of see what Mitch has there and see what's available.
And I mean, the only thing that I can say now, it's like, thank God for IMDb, because a lot of times I'll start watching one and it'll be like 5 minutes in. I'm like, I've seen this. And then I go to IMDb and I've seen it, but it was some completely random different title, especially when you get into like the Bruce exploitation movies. And, I think there's like three different Big Boss twos. And I think there might be two different Big Boss threes. So like, you kind of have to just, caveat emptor a little bit, because with it being so prevalent, a lot of times, like sometimes you'll get the same movie on the same site under two different titles.
Right, yeah, because that was such a big thing. I know. Was it one of was the Big Boss that was mislabeled the Chinese Connection, or
Yeah, and so I always refer, or it was called Fist of Fury here, and so like, and I always, when I, just because I remember having those old video cassettes, and renting them, like, every other week. Like for me, Chinese Connection will always be Fist of Fury, and vice versa, because uh, um, just from the sheer fact that that's how I first saw it. So whatever I look it up, I'm always like, okay, which one am I really looking up here?
right. It's such a fascinating thing. I think it's, again, to your point with your site being the video vacuum, where you consume everything. And for me, I try to consume more. Obviously, the stuff I'm doing is strictly kind of more in the direct to video realm, but I just love this variety of where you've got like Hong Kong movies that could have any variety, any number of titles that could, and it could, this whole market of, let's have people that look like Bruce Lee and market them as Bruce Lee-esque with a different version of the name, or the wave movies that we were just talking about, or again this, the Dolph Lundgren 2000s DTV movies. You've got so many different things to go through, but there's just so many different versions of what this art of cinema can be that it's just so amazing.
Yeah, and I'm always, looking for that. I always say movies are my drug of choice. I'm always like looking for the next high, whether it's the a wave movie, or a fake Bruce Lee movie. And I think a lot of people have a different jumping on point for stuff, whether it's horror, whether it's action, whether it's just like, kind of like cult movies. Like I think everybody kind of speaks the same language, and it's cool to see, especially like when we see actors that we know and love, like kind of that can play in all of those areas. And to see, I'm the kind of person that, like, if Bo Hopkins is in a movie, I'll watch it just because Bo Hopkins is in the movie.
Right.
So my bar for movie watching is kind of low, but that usually generates some big highs rather than some deep lows. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree. 'Cause it's like you watch some of these movies where it's like, they're like, think of like a Godfrey Ho movie where it's just like, here's Richard Harrison talking on a Garfield phone. You've got ninjas with the word ninja written as sort of like a 80s ski resort script, or something like that. Completely mixed with some like Thai movie, or a Hong Kong movie or something that he bought the rights to, that he's just sort of splicing them together. And it's so outside of what we think of cinema should be. But then it's like, well, why should we think that cinema should be anything other than what it is? And it's like, you watch one of those movies and you kind of just settle in and say, yeah, I'm going to let Godfrey Ho do whatever Godfrey Ho is going to do. And I'm going to just accept this for what it is, and either have fun with it or not, and it can be kind of one of those things too, where sometimes the other footage is like kind of a drag, and it's like, I want more Richard Harrison. And then the other thing too is you're seeing the same Richard Harrison that you saw in 3 other Godfrey Ho movies. It's like the exact same scenes of him talking on the Garfield phone, just saying something completely different. It's what people do with movies. It's such a crazy concept.
yeah, and it's like I said, kind of what Gary Witt said. It all has to go through his lens before anything can happen. So when you have like a Godfrey Ho, is he playing 4D chess? Is he seeing this movie and saying like, oh, I could put Richard Harrison here. I could put a couple smoke bombs there. I could put Stuart Smith in a ninja tunic there. Or is he just doing it on the fly and just making movie magic as it happens. Who knows? And I think that's why we come back to those movies again and again.
Well, the other thing I love too about Godfrey Ho is that there's like a sense of like him not fully understanding American culture. I mean, you sometimes kind of see it in some of the old canon movies with Menahem Golan, where he doesn't always quite understand American culture. I mean, was it Lemon Popsicle? Was that the movie that he was trying to make his own teen romp? Or Lemon
Hmm.
Popsicle is the Israeli version, right? It's was it Last American Virgin? Virgin was the version here.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like you watch that and you're just like, boy, there's some stuff that he really gets right, but there's some other stuff where it's like no American would put that in a movie for Americans. You know? And I wonder if Godfrey has a similar mindset where he's working in the same vein as a Gary Whitson or a PM Entertainment, where it's like I want my movies to be on cable in America or in video stores in America, and I want people to watch them and stay, watching them and not turn them off when they realize like, oh, this isn't American Ninja and it's not Enter the Ninja or any of those kinds of things, that it's my own thing. What can I do to keep Americans watching? Oh, well, Garfield's really popular in America. I bet that would be something that I could put in the movie. And it's like, okay, Richard Harrison talking about Garfield, but it's like, the things that he picked up about American culture that he thought would be cool. The fact that he missed makes it even better.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where when you see a Garfield phone now, just by osmosis, you think Richard Harrison just because of that. Um, at least I do, and you do. I'm sure you do.
Yes, yes.
But like it's one of those things where for guys like us that watch these movies, it's like a cinema shorthand. It's like uh, and I think that like I said, like a Godfrey Ho, like I would say maybe a uh, yellow belt. Like if you're getting into bad movies or whatever, like that, I would hit those before the wave movies. But like maybe I need to make an official ranking system of,
Yes.
of the color belts to get into. Um, before you face off the big boss, which I guess would be Neil Breen. I
Right, Neil
guess.
Breen would probably, yes. Because I was trying to think of that too, like canon. I think like '80s canon, like like the Death Wish sequels, maybe. Even though they're more violent, I think maybe that's like like a higher level where you can watch it. And I always think like Bridge of Dragons is one that my friends and I would always introduce to people who were new to watching these kinds of movies, because we always felt like, one, there wasn't anything too bad in them, right? In terms of like, there wasn't any like sexual assault or rape or anything like that in the movies, anything like on those lines. But it was just so over the top, with Dolph getting kicked or somebody kicking somebody and like flipping around and the noise and all that stuff. We would know if we could get them involved with that, then maybe we could move up to like Showdown in Little Tokyo that has that's kind of more of a fun bad actioner, but also has some stuff in it where you're like, oh boy, yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to handle that or not.
Well, like I always say, in Showdown Little Tokyo is 79 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can't make a movie that good in 79 minutes, then it might be time to hang it up. And I think Gary Whitson has beat it by like the what was uh Eaten Alive, A Tasteful Revenge. I think that was like a cool 29 minutes without taste. So I mean he kind of beat Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing when you think. I mean, because a lot of those wave movies aren't that long. They're like, I think at the most you're going to get like a 42-minute or something like that. And then a lot of times he'll tack on extra footage from older movies, so you kind of get your money's worth when you buy, if you pay like $25 for them. But yeah, I mean, it's like, sort of those Dolph movies are like one tier. And then yeah, like PM Entertainment is probably like another tier of low budget action, where some of them are really good. Some of them if you're watching like Shotgun or something like that, or something, Repo Jake, like you're probably going another level. AIP, right, is another level below that. And then
That would be I think the next color in the rainbow.
right, exactly, yeah, yeah. So like Canon and PM is like you're just starting out, and you're kind of doing those ones. Yeah, I'm trying to think like, yeah, AIP, and then yeah, I mean below AIP would be Godfrey Ho maybe. That's and I guess what we were saying like was a level before Wave, like maybe it was Godfrey Ho, right? There was like another level,
Yeah.
yeah.
So definitely. And then I think Neil Breen would be like, if you want your black belt in bad movies, you have to watch the entire Neil Breen filmography, which I totally like recommend because again, like a Godfrey Ho, like a Gary Whitson, only one person alive can make the movies that they make.
Right.
And even Ed Wood, I would put him in the conversation because when when you see one frame of a movie, you're like Neil Breen
Right. Yes.
or Ed Wood. You
Yeah.
see
Todd Sheets is another one. Maybe you'd put it there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's one of those things where, like I said, like I tried to leave no stone unturned because if I was to just say, "Oh, Neil Breen, look at that PowerPoint graphic being passed off as a special effect,"
Right.
yeah, I would miss the forest for the trees there. So and the fact that like a lot of the the really good bad filmmakers like a Tommy Wiseau or uh, Godfrey Ho, like they buy into what they're selling so good, and it's like the line between art and lack of art, shall we say, is totally blurred, where it just becomes this uh, just. It's like a Mobius strip. It comes back to art again, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's a when you're watching those and you're just getting yeah, there's a certain catharsis that comes when you make it through a certain point of the movie and you realize what you're watching and it all kind of just comes together like you said where it's like art and not art. It's sort of the line is so blurred that you don't even know where you are anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, like I live for those moments. I live for the samurai cops and the Miami connections and just kind of like I said, like I try to leave no stone unturned. If I hear even like in the on Tubi, like Popeye's Revenge, or like like I'm like, well, I have to see that. I have to see Popeye slasher movie, and it's surprise, not bad. Um, and that's why I watch it because I if I just shrugged as like, oh, I'm not going to watch that, like I wouldn't have gotten to see Popeye with his huge deformed arms, killing camp counselors. So
Right, right, exactly. It's like I mean, it's another area of this now that like all of these cartoons that we grew up that were first started in the kind of the early ages of animation in the the turn of the 20 or the early part of the 20th century. Suddenly now all of these characters are public domain. And what's the first thing that happens when characters go public domain? Apparently, you make horror movies about them, right? Whether it's Winnie the Pooh or Popeye the Sailor Man. It's like such a fascinating concept that it's like yeah, again, it's like this is movie making in a different way.
and it's so hilarious to me. I think it was it Scree the Mousetrap was the one that I saw,
Oh yeah,
where it's obvious they're using a public domain figure, Mickey Mouse, as their killer.
right.
What do they do when they put the title on the screen? They have the copyright date and notice just about as big as the title itself.
Right,
Like, you better not steal our copyright.
right, right.
And that automatically you're in that mindset, like, oh my god, this is at least going to be fun because uh just seeing that alone was like the biggest laugh I think in the entire movie.
Yeah, so perfect. Yeah, it's there's so much good stuff out there. It's one of those the funny things. We talked about this with the streaming element, where on the one hand, streaming is bad because the movies that we grew up with or we really like. There's this 3 card Monty thing where this movie Superman it is now is always going to be on HBO Max. Okay, so I know it's always going to be on HBO Max until one day HBO gets bought out by Paramount and Paramount decides let's not have it on HBO Max anymore. Or let's not have HBO Max anymore. Let's have Paramount, and we'll decide when we want. And so it's like, okay, now I'm going to actually buy Superman, so I can trust that it's going to be there. So you've got that one side of it, and then on the other side of it, there's this democratization where you can go on Tubi and see a Popeye the Sailor Man slasher film, a Godfrey Ho movie. I think there are a couple Wave movies on there as well. I think right. It's the Mad Doctor of Zombie Island. Is that I can't remember the
Yeah,
name.
that one's on there, and I believe the mail order massacres on there as
That's right, the
well.
documentary. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a good sampler to for anyone that's unsure whether they should get into it or not. Just watch the documentary. You'll see if it's your cup of tea real quick.
Yes, yeah. And I don't remember what number podcast episode it was that we did where we talked about that. But that's what people can check that out and see. Because we go into it in a little more detail. And so, like I said, it was an episode that when it first came out, it did about what a normal episode did, but then it sort of just it blew up not long after. And so,
It's kind of like Wave itself.
right, exactly. Yes, exactly right. You didn't know what you were going to get from Wave to start with, and then suddenly it got big there. And I mean, again, it's just the genius idea of it, of like, okay, I want to make movies. I don't have the budgets to make these movies. So it's episode 129 in the archives for people. So that's the one we talked about Wave production. So it's from back in July of 2023. So it's already been over 2 years since we discussed that movie. But yeah, it's you watch that kind of the rise of it, but it's this idea of like, this guy Gary Whitson here in South Jersey wants to make movies, and at first he's just sort of making horror movies and things like that, and then it's like, well, what if I tell people they can make what they want? And suddenly they're all like, well, yeah, we want to make we want to have Debbie D tied up and strangled. That's what we want for the movie. Okay, I'll make that movie. Then suddenly more people wanted that than he thought, and it's like, okay, well, I'll just have to subsidize my movies this way. And and he comes up with this whole niche of movies that he's making that are like really successful and a ton of fun.
And he's making movies, and I mean, he's living the dream. And I think if he ever for a second stopped to say, should I make this movie, I don't think Wave would exist. I think he just it comes off the fax machine or whatever it was in the 90s, like, okay, well, we need a noose and a pair of handcuffs and some fake blood, and we got ourselves a movie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I always talk about do you remember they had the And One mixtape tour with the And One, like the street ballers that would travel the country, and so instead of having like Michael Jordan represent And One shoes, they'd have like Hot Sauce or somebody like that would do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I remember there was this one guy, his name was Ali Mo, who he's from New York City, and he had like a career where he looked like he was going to be able to play in college. He was recruited by Jerry Tarkanian in UNLV, and he ended up like skipping out. Like they bought him a plane ticket to go out there and meet him, and he cashed in the tickets and went and did his own thing. So he kind of didn't make it into the pros, and he was playing street ball, and he ends up doing enough with the street ball that he got picked up by And One as part of their mixtape tour. So he was traveling. So they're interviewing him about that, and he's telling his story about how he blew his chance to go in the NBA because of all this stuff, but he's like, right now, basketball is my job. That's the most important thing. It's like people will say, oh, you didn't make the NBA, you didn't do it. That's fine. But basketball is my job. That's my profession now, is I'm professionally getting paid whatever it is a year to do that. And I kind of think the same thing with Gary Whitson. Making movies is his job. So whatever people want to say about Wave movies or any of those things, he can say that I'm a filmmaker. That's my job. And I think that's like the most important thing.
Yeah, and the fact that it's almost like a mom and pop organization, that if you look at Hollywood as Blockbuster, and he's like a mom and pop shop.
Yeah.
I think that gives it a charm, and charm isn't usually the words that you use for a shot on video bondage horror movie.
Right.
But I'll be damned if they don't have a certain charm to them, and an idiosyncratic, just like I said, like any hallmark of a great like WTF filmmakers. You can look at one frame of one movie and you're like, that's a Gary Whitson movie.
Yeah, and I think too, again, this is where the stars of those movies come into play. That I think like I don't think they would work as well if you did, if they didn't. And they talk about this in the documentary that getting Tina Kraus to do the movies, or Debbie D, or Laura Giglio. I mean, in her case, she talks about it in the documentary where her mom wouldn't let her make the movies. So the moment she was old enough, she reached back out to Gary Whitson and said, "Hey, do you still need people to make the movies?" He's like, "Yeah, you want to come on and make the movies?" And so suddenly she just jumped in. And it's like, yeah, when you get people that are that committed to the bit, I mean, going back to Todd Sheets, he has like this cadre of actors that just are committed to making his movies the way he makes them, and that makes them so much fun. And I mean, yeah, the fact that Tina Kraus is like so game for it, or Debbie D, or Laura Giglio. It makes it so much more fun when you're watching it to see them like that committed to the bit.
Yeah, and I think more than a few of them, I think or at least more than one in the documentary, when they make a movie, they say, "This is my last one." And somehow they always kind of get back into the fold of making it. And I think, and like you said, it's fun when you see, like a Tina Kraus or a Pamela Such like show up in something else, and the fact that they can still kind of play in both sandboxes is really fun.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've got to go check. I was on the website. I was looking at some of the different ones that they had, and I was like, I was trying to find some of the ones that I had wanted to see. Like, I think one that was on YouTube was it was like was Pamela Such played like some like it was like almost like a Tarzan kind of thing where
Rana, the Jungle Girl, I
that's
think.
right. Yes, and they were
And I
fighting
think there's two
Nazis.
of those.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Tina Kraus plays like a Nazi woman. Who
Yeah. What more do you want?
Right, exactly. And again, like they just do it. They're perfect, and it all works. And they're in the woods somewhere in the Pine Barrens in Jersey, and they've got an area that they called quicksand. And hey, it's quicksand enough, and the characters are all there doing their thing. Yeah, it's so perfect, and I've got to start. Maybe I'll pick up the newest one, but I haven't reviewed any Wave movies, and I mean they are direct to video. They're as direct to video as it gets, so I should be reviewing some of them.
It's like immediately on video.
Exactly.
There's no direct. It's like boom, there it is.
Exactly. And I feel like they what I've found is that the lower the budget on them and the more independent they are, the more the filmmakers appreciate the review, even if you don't like the movie. Which again, with a Wave movie, I don't even say it's a sliding scale on a Wave movie. I think like what you like about a Wave movie or don't like is a completely different set of criteria than you would have for another movie.
Well, I think you do have to have a little bit of an expectation when you go in, because there are some like say like Dead North, where they're trying to replicate a an actual movie with a plot and like doing something in the horror genre, or like Sorority Slaughter, where they're trying to do their version of like a sorority house massacre kind of thing. So those movies, you at least know, one, they're going to have a plot, and two, that they're going to follow at least some sort of accepted rule of cinema, like there's going to be a beginning, middle, and end. Whereas something like The Women Eaters does not.
Right.
Or Eaten Alive does not follow any. It beats to its own drummer, and it's all the better for it too. But so I will say, like, kind of know, because like if you see the In Dire Straits label,
Mm-hmm.
that's the sub label of the Wave movie, where people would write their own script and send it into Gary, and he would make it. So when you see that label, you're in for something that's going to be a little bit more tawdry.
Right.
But that's not always the case. So it could go, but a lot of those, especially the early ones, they were trying to follow like a horror template, whether it's somebody's getting a inheritance and all the family members are getting killed off,
Right.
or like I said, the sorority girls are being picked off by a slasher. But then there are just the ones where it's just head scratching, jaw dropping, for like 50 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was trying to think of the one that Gift Wrapped and Gutted. That was one that I caught recently. That's if you're looking for a holiday film to watch, Gift Wrapped and Gutted is Laura Giglio, she upsets her husband so much that he chloroforms her, and then she wakes up like tied up in their. Oh, because right, she's mad because he's not putting up the Christmas decorations. I think, right? I think it's what happens in that one. And so she wakes up like tied up in the Christmas decorations, and then he strangles her, and then he goes on a killing spree, killing a whole bunch of other women that are at like a Christmas party or something like that. And so, Gift Wrapped and Gutted. That's another one of their Wave movies.
I mean, what if you're not in the holiday spirit after that, I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly, exactly. And again, it's it's. I mean, these actors they're all a little older than us, which I think is what makes it kind of funny that it's menopause is part of the script, because the women being a little bit older now, that's where that's part of what they're dealing with. But it's like the fact that they're still so game for some of these things, because again, at my age, I'm a little bit younger than them, but some cases I think I'm like probably like I mean maybe not quite 10 years younger than them, but I'm like, man, I don't know how much I'd want to be like running in the woods or whatever, or doing some of these things. But they're just like, hey, we're going to keep going for it. We're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long scene, and I say long scene, and remember, this is a 47-minute movie where Laura Giglio takes off her bra and puts on a t-shirt and then proceeds to do jumping jacks for about 5 minutes before the worm shows up. So it's like, it's one of those where like, how is this furthering the plot? I have no idea, but I totally agree with everything that's going on here.
Right. And, for her, she's just like, oh man, I can't believe I bet because they joked about this in the wave thing, that they would talk about that, like when they were in the scenes where they were getting strangled or whatever, that like the guy the guy who'd maybe shooting it, that's not Gary Whitson, but one of the other guys would be like, no, we need more. And they're like, what? You need more? It's like, yes, I wonder if that was like the same thing with the jumping jacks. It was like, okay, can I stop now? No, keep going. Keep doing jumping jacks.
And it's like, and it might have been a thing where like, hey, we at least have to have this 45 minutes long, so you're just gonna have to keep jumping for the next couple minutes here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think people definitely check those out. Maybe I'll put the link to their site in our podcast description as well, so you can go check out Wave Movies. I probably should have done it when I did the original when back the original episode when we talked about Wave Movies, because but like you said, I think for most people listening to this, they're probably a good belt away from being able to watch some of these. But yeah, if you're going through the film, I mean, especially some of the ones that Ty and I do, some of the new direct-to-video movies, if you're handling a John Travolta, Randall Emmett, direct-to-video movie, if you can manage that, the Wave movies at least are more fun than those, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it all depends on what you want out of a movie. Do you want something that's replicating what we traditionally accept as a movie? Then yeah, those John Travolta DTV movies. But if you just want, like I said, like outlaw art at its finest, and go with the Wave.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, and again, I think the other thing too to keep in mind when you're spending the money, they are a little bit more expensive. I think they're like $20 to $25, I think, right, for the
yeah.
So they're a little bit
worth every penny for the women eaters, but your mileage may vary, definitely.
But the other thing too is that you're giving money to a good cause. I think if
absolutely,
I think it's whenever you give money to indie projects or indie companies like this, you're getting the product, and then they're getting a gift from the sale.
And the turnaround was crazy. Like I got it like that week, so.
Yeah, so imagine
I'm in Delaware, he's in Jersey, so you would, but at the same time, it was I had it within the week, so
yeah, so I'm even closer. I think I probably would get it within the week as well, because I'm like I'm like a New Jersey Transit bus ride away from where they are, so I could be there in an hour or so from them. So I mean, Debbie D, I think, is from South Philly. I know she said I know her bio says she's from Philadelphia, but I think based on her accent, I think she's from here.
Oh yes,
yeah, exactly.
And we talked about that too, just like that kind of like that comfort food aspect of just hearing like the stuff you hear in your own backyard,
right.
On the screen, as opposed to the supermarket.
Right, exactly. Yes, it is. It's so perfect. And yeah, she gets it perfect. They all do. It's so good. So yeah, I'll put the link in the podcast description for this. But yeah, Mitch, it was another really fun conversation. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.
know